Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Standing Committee on Strategies and Public Policies. It's funny because this is not a public meeting. Oh, it is a public, yes, that's right. It is a public meeting, Your Worship. Having said this, let's begin by saying that the City of Dieppe recognizes that the land on which it operates is part of the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq. Also, dear colleagues, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Good evening. Welcome to all of you. It's a big night. We're going to be talking a lot about the future in particular, but as it regards the future, let's begin right away with our CAO, and that will launch the future. Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, everyone. As you know, every year we give you our budgetary proposals. As you all know, because of provincial elections, we received information about the new property tax with about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that was the timeline for presenting something to you here tonight. All this began on October 21st with presentations by external commissions and boards. Tonight, we are dealing with the capital budget, operating budget, water and sewer, and general operating budget. Before giving the floor to our municipal staff, I want to tell you the elements that we based our proposals on for this budgetary process. Our proposals agree with the Council's priorities based on the strategic plan that we passed several weeks ago, and those of our master plans that every service that works with each year. In our planning of the 2025 budget, we took into consideration the increase of property assessment for homes and affects the property taxes bills of our residents. We undertook toward you and citizens that we would take this into consideration. So our treasurer will share this information with you in a moment. We revise our base budget. It was another undertaking we had made to the municipal council. The process was revised, and our financial plan, which will be shared by Mr. Theriault. In order to attempt to reduce the financial burden of our residents, all while respecting our commitments and undertakings, because we have all kinds of responsibilities for citizens' services, we are reducing the tax and freezing rates for 2025. So I will now allow my colleagues to give you the details of these budgetary proposals. And I think Marie-Ève Godbout is going to, or Mr. Theriault maybe. Mr. Theriault, one moment until I find you here. Just a... Thank you, Mr. Theriault. Oh, he chose to sit there. Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, all colleagues and members of the public. Today, as you've heard, we're beginning on October 21st with external commissions, and today, as the CAO has just told you, we're giving you the replacement programs. Guillaume Ducheux will be telling you about that. We'll be talking about building renovations. Rémi Comeau will do that. The capital budgets and operating budgets will be presented to you by Marie-Ève Godbout and Marc-André Cormier. I'll be doing the operating budgets at the end. We'll keep that as your dessert. Next Monday, we'll be coming back with council authorization. And on Monday, 9th of December, this will be the last time they'll be looking at budgets, and we're talking about reserves, transfers to reserves. So you will now have the pleasure of hearing about our budget for 2025. Guillaume? Your Worship, good evening, and members of council, dear colleagues. So this is the first time for me, so I ask for your patience. I'll be telling you about equipment replacement for 2025-2026. As you know, every year we need to renew some of our equipment in order to ensure the proper functioning of our city. An analysis of the equipment by the head mechanic and his team, whom I thank. This analysis was done based on the date of acquisition, the number of kilometers, the number of hours has been used, the general state of it, and the relevance for replacement. This report will allow us to optimize demand and to see if it's necessary to replace equipment. Replacement program for 2025. Initially, we thought that 29 pieces of equipment might have to be renewed. But after our analysis, we've decided that only 14 are going to be replaced. The estimated amount for replacement is $4,228,400. 15 pieces of equipment will be postponed for 2 to 5 years' time, thanks to our mechanic team, and we will be able to postpone an expenditure of $571,000. These will be necessary in the next 2 to 5 years. The replacement program 2025, following this annual assessment, these 14 pieces of equipment that are going to be replaced will be a dredging truck, a ride-on mower, 3 buses, two trucks, one 4-door, one half-ton, a utility vehicle, an all-terrain vehicle, three articulated tractors, and snow blowers. For 2025, with regard to public works, facilities, fire, and transit, as of 31st of December 24, there's a balance of $4.19 million. The annual budget for 2025 is $2.48 million. For 26, $2.94 million. Purchases in 2025 are $4.23 million, and for 2026, the amount is $2.99 million. Here is some of the equipment that you'll be seeing in the city of Dieppe. Questions? Comments? Questions by members of council? Let's begin with Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Your Worship. I would like an explanation about your last slide. I understand that this is the one. We see we have an annual budget of $2.48 million, but we're purchasing $4.23 million worth of equipment. Can you explain? So how's that happening and where's that money going? Today, we have a balance of 2.48 million, and every year we look for funding, which is added in supplementary funds. This allows us to accumulate a $2.4 million budget. Yes. Maybe someone else could be more specific in the answer. Please come to the microphone, Marie-Ève. So in the replacement program, there's a reserve. To the microphone, please. We have a program, an equipment program. So we have the replacement program, and at the end of the year, there's an amount of a forecast amount of 4 million. And every year, as I explained last week, so this year in 2025, we're adding $480,000. So it varies from year to year. That's why we try to have enough money in the pot, if I may express it this way, for years where there are more purchases. And in 2026, it's probably going to be close. We're going to put $2.94 million in the replacement program, and we only are going to use 2.99 million, so it's fairly close, but the reserve is there for that reason, when we have more purchases than what we put in the budget. No, I have another question added to that, and it's probably the difference in the way that that you answer this. So why wouldn't the budget have been 4.23? It's to leave it more constant from year to year. We increase year by year. So it's the replacement budget. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor or Mr. Thériault. To simplify things, let me say that the operating budget is the source of financing, and every year as Marie-Ève just explained, instead of we want to keep it fairly constant year after year. According to our financial plan, we put 25% toward assets. So for many years now, we've been accumulating, and now we're at 4.2 million as a reserve. So this year, by buying 2.5 million, we've brought down the reserve. I'm sorry, we've buying for $4.23 million. So $2 million more. So the difference is going to be taken from the reserve fund. So there's about another $2.5 million in the budget for 2025. And next year, it's about equal. The reserve should not change. The idea behind this is that every year we increase the budget by 5 to 10% for the operating budget to add to that reserve, because between 2030 and 2040, this is where the asset useful life is going to have to change. So we're planning for the future in the replacement programs. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions related to this? Councillor Godbout. If I follow this logic, then at the end of 2025, the reserve will have gone down by 1.7 million? No, because we have 4.1. Yes? Okay, thank you. So our reserve will be lower at the end of 2025. Great, thank you. Okay. Councillor Chenin, thank you, Your Worship. I had a question about the equipment. To come back to initially, there were 29 things that were going to replace, but only 14 are going to be replaced. Can you explain how you arrived at this recommendation to only replace 14 things? Like how do we rely on the fact that we're only replacing 14 instead of 29? Is there any risk? No, there is no risk. All the vehicles go into the workshop, and the head mechanic and the team work and do the follow-up, and they will see whether this piece of equipment can continue on for another 2, 3, or 4 years. So we are ready to say that this equipment is available, can work. The mechanics have made an additional effort, and this allows us to have equipment that is going to last much longer, and we can keep them, these parts and pieces, much longer. Thank you. Any further questions? None? Thank you for this presentation. And the next presentation, Mr. Comeau. Mr. Comeau, good evening. Good evening, Your Worship and council members. This evening, I'm going to be overviewing the building renovation program for the city of Dieppe. So a quick overview of our buildings. There are 27 buildings. There are bigger buildings that are in the program. The value of these buildings in 2018 was assessed at $100 million of all these 27 buildings. And at the same time, in 2018, we looked at all these buildings, and at that time, the value was of $10.2 million. And today, that $10.2 million are renovations, worth of renovations are required. And the reason I'm telling you about the values from 2018 is that we had to update the information on our buildings because the data, the values are not quite actual because there was a lot of change due to inflation over the past years. So the program that we applied for through FCM should be providing us with an answer early in 2025. And we are hoping to get approval for the project. And with FCM, we're going to be able to analyze our buildings. The purpose is to look at the 11 biggest buildings, which will allow us to have better data to provide you next year. And with these updated values, these assessments will not only be good for assessing the value of the buildings, but to have zero net buildings. This is going to give us an action plan for the coming 20 years for the 11 buildings that we've chosen, which are the highest energy consumption buildings. So after we get these reports, we are going to be able to provide this information and look at projects to reduce energy consumption for our buildings and also reduce pollution at the same time. This program is interesting because 90% 20% of, or 80% of the costs are being paid by the program. So the FCM is going to be paying most of that cost. The renovation program for buildings in 2024, we have a balance of $610,000. Every year, we add $350,000 to this budget. And so this year, we're going to be using $410,000 from the reserve for a total budget of $760,000 that we're going to be using this year. At the end of 2025, there will be a $200,000 reserve. Let me tell you about the projects that are going to be undertaken in 2025 for this amount of $760,000. So the first thing that we're going to do in 2025 is to modernize the ventilation system in the Maison des Jeunes. It's been the same system since it was built. It's due to be replaced. So that's a cost of $60,000 for the ventilation, the HVAC system. The system is going to be much more energy friendly. A new boiler for City Hall. The heating system has gone beyond its useful life. At the Uniplex, some changes are going to be done to the room to accommodate the generator, and that's going to cost $200,000. In the aquatic center, with the increase, there's a high usage building, and so the change rooms need to be renovated, the 3 change rooms. So the men's, women's, and the family change rooms have to be amended for $180,000, floors and showers. And so we have to leave these things in good condition. Also, the roof has to be done at the pumping station on Amiro Road. So the $50,000 is related to that project that I mentioned earlier, related to the FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So I want to tell you about projects I talked about the 2025 projects. Let me tell you about the upcoming projects in 2026. The flooring of the Dieppe market. The reason is there an asterisk there is because we're in discussions with the Dieppe market. So according to what's decided, we might be able to change the program if need be. Right now, the floors are probably going to be needed to be replaced. And the Aqua Center, $100,000 for the dehumidifier for the pool, which needs to be modernized. Some of the controls, it's still good, but some of the controls, so it's a mechanical change that we're looking at. In 2027, work needs to be undertaken at City Hall. So inside lighting in all the offices, because we have done some in the common spaces, but inside the offices themselves, the lighting needs to be replaced and flooring needs to be changed too. And the Rotary Pavilion, we're looking at replacing the wood shakes on the outside of the building. That was the renovation to buildings. We have a second program, and that is building replacement. These are for major works, and instead of borrowing money, we have funds to make bigger renovations. There's a balance of $1.982 million in reserve at the end of 2024. Every year, we add $540,000 to the budget. So we will be using $500,000 in the budget. And so we will put $40,000 back into the reserve. And at the end of 2025, there'll be $2.22 million. So $500,000 that we're going to take from the replacement program in 2025 is to renovate the AGL for 2025 to make it net zero. In 2026, the roof of the Dieppe market on the south side will need to be replaced, and also the roofing of the Repère Jeunesse in Dieppe, which will be replaced in 2026. And finally, in 2027, also new roofing on the north side of the Arts Center. So that's what I had to tell you about for the buildings renovation and replacement. Any questions or comments by council members? Let's begin with Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. One question about the Uniplex and the electric room and the generator. The generator, is it included in that amount, the 200,000, or is it only to upgrade the electric in order to accommodate the generator? No, it's that amount is only for electric upgrades. The generator is already purchased and it should be arriving in April. I know that we had talked about it and we'd approved it, but my question was more, was this not an emergency? Because it could become an emergency center, welcome center, if we had an outage. Wasn't that one of the issues that we talked about? Yes, the generator could provide electricity for the whole building. So it could operate as if there were no outage. After that, it would be a place, it wouldn't be my sector which would determine where in the building that would happen, but it will be heated. And yes, it could be an option. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. My question relates to the Arts and Culture Center. I know, and I'm on the board there. We've talked about growth management of the building itself because it's much busier than before. Projects seem to be being put forward. Has this been mentioned or is it included in the budget? Are we going to be helping out in that way? We're talking about a project to complement other activities. So we had a meeting last week with the responsible people in the Arts Center and the executive director. We're talking to the people who are responsible. It's not part of the projection because it's a new discussion for us. So we'll be meeting with them and plan what will be happening and how to integrate that into our program in 2027. We see that there is a roofing repair being set aside. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you. Things are happening at the Arts Center. Just to clarify, this program is to repair existing. It's not to add new. It's to maintain what we already own and make sure that it's maintained in proper condition. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Worship. I have a question about the values from 2018. The replacement for all buildings would amount to $100 million at 2018 values. Shouldn't we be budgeting a little bit more since these are 2018 values? Even if we don't know exactly what it will be right now, I think that we should be forecasting a certain margin. Yes, the purpose was to show you the value of our current buildings and the necessary renovations. With the new analysis that we do in 2025, we will have more specific data. We could have increased it, but without having requested an expert firm to do that for us, it would have been only an estimate. In 2018, an analysis had been undertaken by a firm, and these were the real values of the buildings. So we're going to redo this exercise in 2025. Yes, we could have changed the values and added inflation. We're very much conscious that the value is much higher than 100 million. Yes, there's been quite a bit of inflation since 2018. Great, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're done. Next presenter. Good evening again, Your Worship and council members and work colleagues. So let's begin The capital budget presentations for the coming 3 years, 2025 to 2027, Mr. Cormier and I will do the presentation as we shared last year. This is like last year, we had gone through the financial plans, and there we are forecasting a change in the coming year in 2025. So we wanted to re-explain what's happening. The debt ratio we had provided, the objective was to attain 10% in 2027, was attained in 2023. And so we expect to align the maximum amount of loans, of borrowing. Previously, it was $1.5 million per year or 4.5 million over 3 years, but we realize that is not necessarily realistic because prices are increasing, the budget is increasing. So we're looking at getting a ratio, a debt ratio of 10%. Here's a graph to show you that for the past several years, we're under the red line, which is our goal of under 10%. So we're under that 10%. But the big projects that are coming forward will increase that in the 3 coming years. And so this is also an overview of the financial plan. When there is a budgetary surplus, here's what we do with that money. First of all, we fill up the reserve funds, a maximum of 5%, which is based on the annual budget. Every year, we add a small amount to that fund, and then we have a reserve for the equipment replacement program. Yes, money is put into these programs every year and also to finance future projects. There is the operating capital, which was explained by Mr. Thériault. And so 25% of the operational budget is set aside and the replacement for equipment as well as paying down the debt. So in order to reduce our debt ratio, we want to increase that which goes onto the capital budget. So for the 3 upcoming years, there are big projects happening. There's a total of $150 million total budget. So transportation, 73 million, infrastructure, water sewage, 32.6 million, culture, recreation, and community living, 33.1 million, fleet and equipment, 8.5 million, and land purchases, 2.4 million. The sources of financing to cover these projects, the operating budget of $32.7 million, gas tax, we get a little more than $2 million, so it'll be $6.4 million in 3 years, reserves for surpluses, and when the capital projects are done, so there's a little bit of money left over, which we put in the reserve. Contributions by province, federal, or others, $43.2 million, and loans, we are forecasting $49.3 million, for which will be detailed much better in the coming slides. So I'll give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Cormier. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and council members. So the capital projects, I have a lot to tell you about. Next year is a big year. I have a good list, and it's up to you to decide how you want to proceed for questions. I can present a project. If you have questions about that project, don't be shy, let me know. That's okay. I think maybe that's the best way to proceed when it's fresh for everyone and in front of us. Okay. The first thing on the list is micro surfacing. Typically, we put in a thin layer. There's rocks, so it's oil and water included in that. We do this 3 to 5 years after we pave a street, and we do this on collective and arterial streets. Internally, we have a policy. We say if there are 4,000 to 5,000 cars on those roads every day, we don't normally see these on local streets. So for 2025, we have, where is it now? Acadie Avenue that we paved in 2021, and Dieppe Boulevard in between Canaan and Aucoin, if I'm not mistaken. There's a map going to be shown here in a moment that will show you exactly where. It's being proposed. Are there any questions for micro resurfacing?
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're talking about that very thin layer that goes onto the street. Is that considered like a sealer? Yes, it's a sort of sealer. It's very thin. It's about 10 to 12 millimeters. Okay, and so that protects the street from breaking down more quickly. Yeah, it increases the lifespan by about 5 to 10 years. Yes, and for the cost, it's a good benefit. All right, I don't see anyone else, so let's continue. Next project, Gauvin Road. So we went to bids in last year, and the bids came in very high. So for next year, we propose increasing the budget envelope. So it's basically Gauvin Road between Collège and Market Street. New sewers, new water mains. There will be a trail on the south side, and we're going to try to beautify the road as well. Since it's in the downtown core, we want to put pits, or with something that's a bit more complicated, basically. The goal is to promote the growth of trees in an area where they'll be surrounded by like a hard surface. So there'll be good growth or good earth so that trees grow properly. And so that's a project for the downtown area. And some of that may come from funds from the tree bylaw. That's why the the tree bylaw has an effect on the budget. So I just wanted to give you an example to show you what type of impact it does have. All right, so that's basically that project. We'll also be adding a trail on the south side of Gauvin, and then also on the market side at the intersection of Acadie and Market. So that'll give access to the river trail. Any questions on that project in particular? Okay, keep on going. Champlain Street, grading and paving. So this project, we got funding, 50-50 funding from the province. So if we want to, for improvements, this project will take place between Aviation and Lorette Streets. And while we're there and we're dealing with what we'll be replacing a water main, one of the oldest ones that dates back to the 1950s. So it's a simple project, grading or re-asphalting, and we may have to remove 40 to 50 millimeters of it, but the water main is between Gauvin and Lorette Street. It's about 575 meters long, but there are 4 lanes on that road. So, any questions on that particular project? Okay, let's keep on going. Sainte-Thérèse Street. This is a complete reconstruction. So we're talking from Paul to Acadie Street. We know that Sainte-Thérèse, there was a comment last year that it's not a good street that's in good shape. So we're going to be replacing rather the water main and doing a lot of other work. And we'll also be installing a trail on the north side. This trail will be extended right up to Notre Dame Street and the Uniplex. And the 2025 project is the phase 1. Phase 2, which will be from Acadie to Notre Dame, that'll be done in 2026. Any questions? No questions? Carry on. Cop Street. This is similar to the other reconstruction projects. So we're going to be changing the water main, the stormwater main. We're going to be evaluating the sewer to see if it has to be replaced. But it may just be small scale changes. And so COP is in the Dieppe East area, and we've been trying to get there for years. Last year, we did another area, but we did Emmanuel Street, and now this year we'll be focusing on COP Street. Mr. Thibodeau, thank you, Your Worship. So COP Street, is there a lot of streets that have to be yet? I know there's Appleton still, and was Barnes done? Not yet. We'll see. In 2027, we're proposing to work on Appleton. Barnes and part of Légère is for 2029. So every 2 years we go back, we go into that area. It's going to be a bit late. You know, I know it's, you know, we've been saying we're going to redo these roads for 10 to 12 years. And so people are starting to get, you know, started to ask questions. Okay, well, maybe we can change the timing for some of them. Yeah, good. That would be a good idea. Do you have a what if list? You know, if costs are lower, I imagine that you have a list of, you know, if we have the money, we can do this as well, and this one. Well, it usually takes a year to design a project. So maybe for that area, we could look at the design of that area, and if we have money, maybe we can do part of that area. It's a possibility. Well, Appleton is not a very long street. It's about the same as COP, I think. I don't think I have the length of the streets here, but it might be the half because it just goes from Champlain to Légère. You know, when I look at the map, both are about the same distance there, so it's not very long. All right, to be taken under advisement. Ms. Leboutier. COP Street, is that where we're going to do the intersection? You know, we'd looked at having public toilets. Is that going to be in that area or is it in another area? I don't know if my colleagues from Public Works, do you have any details on that? Or personally, I haven't seen the plans. So toilets, washrooms near the park, maybe? Yeah, okay, maybe it may not be in that area. Well, we'll take note of it, but I don't think it's in that area where those washrooms will be connected, but I've made a note of it. You have to have pretty solid kidneys to be able to play cricket there, because there's no washrooms in that area. Well, just to give you a bit of context, we had a renovation project with the Boys and Girls Club, and that's part of a bigger project. If you remember, so this is part of having services that will complement what is there already. And so we're looking at not just having a service site, but a bigger complex. All right. That's all. Go ahead. Keep on. Let's continue. The next project is intersection improvements at Champlain and Acadie. This was presented last year, but we waited a bit. So we'll be coming back next year. Some of the recommendations included adding a left lane, so going from Champlain to Acadie, and that would have an impact. So we'd have to do some building there. The lights would have to be replaced. When we had worked on Acadie so we would be doing from Saint Laurent to Champlain. And while we're in that area, we're going to redo Saint Laurent, replacing the water main and sewer lane. The materials that were used to build those mains is very old. So now, also included in this project is, and we've already talked about this, but revarnishing or redoing the conduit. So we'll have to do some excavation work and put a tube or that we can inflate so that we can go in and do the work that we want to do. It's expensive, but it's similar to. So rather than excavating, we'll be inserting a tube to have the work done. Mr. Councillor Brideau. So you were saying that there are improvements are going to be made to Champlain and Acadie. There's already an exit there. So can you explain what you're talking about? What kind of improvements are you talking about? Well, there's the curb on the northeast side that needs to be redone. Okay. It's not in great condition, so we're going to try to improve it, and we'll try to improve the storm sewer system as well. That's near the intersection heading towards Saint Laurent. I think we call that a catch basin in the middle of the street, so we have to do a bit of cleaning there. Okay, let's keep on. The next project, we'll see 4 different streets. So this is replacing water mains. This is a recurring theme, but these mains are made out of cast iron. And and these maybe were there in 1950. They're still there. They're not in great condition. We're lucky that there are not a lot of water main breaks. But when we do replacement work, we see that they're not in great shape. And so this is according to our master plan for the water distribution system. So the recommendation was to replace those mains. And so while we're there as well, we're going to be doing a bit of re-asphalting. We may be sending a probe down into the sewer main as well to see what the conditions are. So there are a number of streets that are affected, but but we're not going to be having to replace all of the mains or the main along the entire length. Thibodaux is just a re-asphalting. I think we're replacing 100 meters of water main, and then so the repaving or re-asphalting was a result of the evaluation test that we did earlier. So it detected faults, and so that's what we're going to be. That's what that project is about. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Sainte-Thérèse Street. So you're talking about replacing the water main, but Sainte-Thérèse was one of the streets that was supposed to be done. And I think that's a street that we had planned on redoing that street. So maybe we could combine the two and do it at the same time. So the water main and the street itself. St. Therese and along with these ones? Is that what your question is? Yes. Well, that would be two different contracts because St. Therese involves a complete reconstruction. In this case, with the four streets, we're looking at just small parts of each street. Well, what I'm saying is that when we complete when we're doing a complete replacement, we could maybe combine some of this work, but all right. Next street, Leblanc Road reconstruction.
des projets aussi prochainement.
Monsieur Brideau.
Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. So I hear you talking about replacing plumbing, we're resurfacing streets. I still haven't heard of what you want to do with Gaspé Street. I have been talking about this for a number of years. So starting at Notre Dame to with Collège, that it's become dangerous. I've said this a number of times. We have to do something. We have a park at the end of that street. We have children walking in the streets along with adults. And at one point, are we going to wait for there to be for someone to die? These are great to see these plans, but I want to be able to reassure people that are complaining, they're saying, when are you going to smarten up here and make something safe? It's just it's not a big piece of road. It's not even a half mile, but I would like to hear what you have to say about this. Okay, well, I'll be talking about it in the next 5 minutes. Good. Councillor Thibodeau. I think the street that Ms. Turgeon-Roy was talking about is Chartersville between Pascal and Dieppe Boulevard. It's really in rough shape. And I'd like to know, we're talking about the evaluation program. Does it look at just at the state of the road or the type and the frequency of traffic? Because that street, I heard a complaint. I've heard the same complaints as Ms. Turgeon-Roy receives. There's lots of trucks that go by there, and with all the bumps, it's noisy. So the evaluation program looks at what it calls the asphalt condition index, and it doesn't look at the type of street. It just looks at the condition or the state of the surface of the road. For Chartersville, in 2027 we have to change the water main, which is not far from Dieppe Boulevard. So that's why we're waiting to do that work. So there will be, because that will involve more extensive work. Okay, well, I was wondering, so the evaluation doesn't take into account the type of traffic, but can we do that? Can't we do that? Well, we'll look at the roads, and and we'll prioritize a main road than a collector road. But all right. If I can add, it's this analysis that allows staff to make decisions. But when we look at collector and local streets, like streets that we talked about, beside COP, the work is postponed because we've got collector roads that are becoming more busy. So we have difficult choices that we have to make. And it's not because we don't want to go everywhere to do work, but we have to make decisions rather. And so that's why we have programs in each area. And so when we have to replace water lines, then we look at the street. We can look at the streets as well. So we're focusing on Acadie this year, or for 2025. So yes, there are a number of needs, but in Chartersville, maybe we have to look at patching. So maybe we can go and maybe we need to fill in some of those holes so that there's less impact on the noisy trucks that Councillor Thibodeau was talking about. Right, and just another point too, we don't like seeing trucks on Chartersville, but I think they're there because of the construction. They shouldn't be there, in normal times. All right, I have another slide for 2025. The extension of Dieppe Boulevard. So next year, we're expecting to issue a bid for the underground mains and for completing the surface of the road. And it's going to take 2 years. It's a huge project. We put $10 million toward that, and we don't know what's going to come of that. We want to connect the main to connect to Amiro Dover, and we're going to focus on that work. But there's also a big part of that money, that amount for road work. There's infrastructure and roundabouts as well. There are culverts. So it's a big project. And that's why we have a big amount for next year and the following year as well. So we put in a big amount there just to cover the work that needs to be done. Any questions regarding Dieppe Boulevard? So just maybe a question. I think we definitely need roundabouts there just to slow the cars down on Chartersville there. But all right, Councillor Gaudette. I'm just trying to understand this budget here. So extension of Dieppe Boulevard 10 million. So is it all city money, or did we get funding for that as well from the province and the federal, or was there a part of that? What was this covers 100% of the construction costs, and I'm not sure, maybe the treasurer could give more detail. Well, as Mr. Cormier said, here what we're talking about, we're presenting 100% of the costs, but a certain amount are funded by the province, and there's another percentage, 17%, that will be covered by charges. So developers will have to pay to kind of connect to Dieppe Boulevard. So here, $10 million represents 100% of the costs, but as you'll see in the next couple slides, you'll see what kind of projects we're proposing as well. Any other questions? Let's keep on. Okay, next project is the construction of Trotteur Lane. So that is a street that will allow the business park, an extension of the business park center. It's about near Ruffin Street. So we're talking about 400 meters, but it involves about 25 acres or 10 hectares. Oh, Pauline not there. I think there was a running or a racing track there. Barrio, the Barrio family, I believe. And one of the barrios has an international reputation with horse racing. So, inaudible comment. You can still see the remnants of the track there, but anyway, so okay, so that's what's proposed for. This is what's being proposed for 2025. Are there any questions on that particular project? Let's continue.
Extending Emmanuel Street. It's in the budget. I want to specify that's not necessarily the city that's going to build it. Extending Emmanuel Street is the Boys and Girls Club to Lorette Street. It's on the north side. It's a developer owns that and is proposing to build apartments, but to build those apartments, he would have to build the road. So we own the southern portion of Emmanuel Street, so there would be a cost sharing. The amount here is 50% of the cost of building that road. I haven't had any more information about this, but it's more related to when the developer is going to be there. It could be this year, it could be next year, but just to be sure, we're putting the amount in for 2025. Okay, let's go. I could add that for this project, there's going to be a trail built from what I heard next week from Lorette Street to the Boys and Girls Club. A little bit of work had been done in conjunction with that. There's a gravel portion that compensated for the damage caused to the culvert. That's just information. The next one is land purchase for engineering projects. So the Gauvin Island at Gauvin and Champlain, we have an agreement with Housing New-Brunswick. There's an amount there to acquire, if you will, these lands. But in reality, we're talking about land exchanges. There's an amount set aside for that and for a collecting sewer at the end of Dover. This would be built in 2026. It was part of the recommendations for the master plan for sewage, and it would go from the intersection of Dover Amiro, and it would head south to the end of Dover Park, and it would be connected by Transaqua. So for collector sewers there, we need to acquire a little bit more land for that project. And because we're doing the building in 2026, we have to acquire some parcels of land. We don't need a complete lot, but we'll do that next year. Any questions for land purchases? There are none. Traffic equipment to improve the safety for transportation throughout the city. So a little more than 100,000. Basically, we're installing flashing lights at Chartersville and Pascal intersection. It's similar to what's at Chartersville Central Thomas. In the future, let's say that we'll be building a roundabout, so it wouldn't be lost there. And also, we want to put up a pole at the intersection of Amiro and Vanier to indicate to cars that they're heading south, and the lanes on Amiro. Right now, there is signage, but it doesn't really follow the standards for the Transportation Association of Canada. So we've asked Energy New Brunswick if we could do that at the intersection in order to comply with these standards. They said no. So we're going to install something which is going to improve the signage there, and it will be a signage above the traffic. And we recommend also flashing lights for the trail at Thomas and Godbout. Like you see in some places around the schools, so you hit a button and there's a quick flashing light. And we will do this at the crossing of Thomas Delbout and a crossing at Amiro and Lafayette for the trail there. They're not traffic lights, but flashing lights above the street. At Amiro and Lafayette, this crossing would improve access to the trail. Councillor Godbout has a question. I have two questions. We had talked about putting a light at the corner of Chartersville and Dieppe Boulevard to turn left. I think there was a crossing there. We talked about it with Mrs. Spencer. Was there confirmation that there wasn't enough lighting there? And was that on the list for improvement? We had checked that if there was a possibility. It's not there, but there's a possibility of doing something I think it would cost less than this. So there's a possibility there. And then the crossing, because when you turn left, when you're going down Chartersville and to turn left onto Dieppe, on the left, there's a pedestrian crosswalk and you don't see anything. You really can't see anything. There's no lighting. There wasn't enough lighting there at the time. So it's a suggestion to check if there's anything left in the budget that you might be able to add something there. And in the traffic equipment, is there a chance or the flexibility if we wanted to install cameras, speed cameras, for example? I know the provincial act allows it. We have to have an agreement with the province, but if there ever was an agreement we could contribute, would it be done within that amount? Mr. Masson, yes, thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Goodbout, this is a file in its own that needs a business case behind it. So it has to be self-financing because of infractions. So I don't think it should be an investment which costs the taxpayers, but it be self-financing. So we've had the approach since the beginning of the discussion with this tool of cameras at intersections where there are traffic lights. That's part of the analysis. And once we know who has the management of that file. So if I've understood correctly, in the future, there could be a situation where it could be incorporated into the budget as an expenditure if we have income somewhere else to compensate for that, to cover that expenditure. That's right. Thank you. Next one, Councillor Turgeon. Thank you, Your Worship. My question about crossings, had you been to see the whole issue of crossings on Paul Street, for example? Because there had been complaints recently from the summer onward where it was difficult to cross and dangerous to cross with all the traffic. We haven't been there yet, but recently there was a piece of equipment that allowed us to count pedestrians and cars as well. It's going to be installed there. It's a new piece of equipment in order to check that out. But in that case, it's possible, and we'll see, rather than the existing light, we call a RA5, there could be lights where you hit a button, like the crossing by Mathieu Martin. Yes, that's right. But it takes some conditions before that goes ahead. Here, there are 4 lanes. If the number of vehicles is high, that might be a requirement. Next year, we're going to be doing the trail that reaches there. So we'll look at the number of pedestrians who use that area, and we could always come back and put traffic lights in as a phase 2 of this project. Great, thank you. But we haven't forgotten that. Thanks. Councillor Brideau. Your Worship, I'll come back to the same question that Councillor Roy asked. When you talk about flashing lights, from what I can see, which really has an impact for people who are walking or car drivers, you know, you have the roundabout at Gauvin, you have lights, they're strobes, I call them, and that works. Paul Street, I had complaints and regularly about this, that at some point someone's going to get their legs broken, but it's just a light on either side and you're on a 4-lane right there. So these lights, if they were seen to be flashing, I think that would resolve a lot of problems and resolve a lot of headaches. Sure, it might be more expensive, but you know, on Gauvin, as soon as you get there, you can't miss it. It's flashing right in your eyes. It's very highly visible. And internally, we're also in agreement with this observation. There's a grid by the ATC which determines what equipment needs to be installed. So flashing lights, we call it rapid rectangular flashing beacons. Depending on the width of the street, how many lanes there are, the speed, a number of cars per day, it determines what solution to use. Often, after a 3-lane road, this is where you are on Paul Street, above the street, and they're flashing a little more slowly. but we agree that if we could have like a strobe light, it would catch your attention. But we're not sure that under the standards of the ATC, I've said this often, when people are looking for this, you've got the first car on the left, it's going to stop, but there's always some car that's coming from the right, and often you slam on the brakes at the last moment because they haven't noticed that the lights are flashing. People who are crossing don't look to see if there are cars coming from the right. They're crossing because they believe that the light's flashing, they have the right to cross. But it's for the cars. Once they arrive there, they're they see, there's speeding happening there too. And so when the days are very busy, you have all kinds of cars there in the 4 lanes. The 4 lanes are full. So this is why I'm wondering if these lights, when they're flashing, you can't help but see them, while the others, in a traffic situation, yes, normally a driver who's agile will notice that there are people who are crossing on foot who don't watch, so there are cars coming from their right. Anyway, that's my opinion, but I know these aren't complaints, but these are comments that people bring forward to me asking, why don't you put the same lights on as you put on Gauvin Street? Because we see these and that works. And okay, yes, thank you. But in that position, if we follow the standards of ATC and if there was enough volume of car traffic, those lights would be put in because of the traffic light situation. It's a little like in front of the college. You hit the button to activate the lights. Councillor Lantagne. Thank you, Your Worship. Quickly, a couple of weeks ago, I had raised the issue that people had almost gotten hit when they were crossing to go to the bus stop at Pascal Champlain. I know we heard that it would take sidewalks on the other side and so on. So I'm wondering if you had looked at this intersection. I don't know how many people cross there to get the bus, but it's a very dangerous intersection. There's a lot of traffic there and quick traffic too. So have you had a look at that intersection? Well, that intersection, it's a little bit complicated only because the property, at Dieppe Boulevard, we don't have a lot of room to play with the right of way. But there's a bus stop there. Should we change the bus stop location? We're talking about people's safety. Well, it's possible. It's internal. There's a trail along Champlain and Pascal is proposed for 2026 and possibly next year. Are there a lot of people who cross there to get the bus? Because there are other bus stops along there. Look, I don't have those figures. It's a little more complicated given the fact that there's no crossing there. Your Worship, if you'd allow me, we have an active file on this situation. We're looking and analyzing it. We're looking at property acquisition to reassure you that we have an active file currently under review to see how we can resolve the situation. Mr. Richard has more details, but we have an open file on it. To reassure Councillor Lantagne, the fact is the number 96 bus goes by there, so it has access for people who need to get there. If they're in the bus to get to the industrial park, the bus goes there. They don't have to cross. Perhaps for some people, they do. But with regard to the bus, there is a bus stop on the other side. The bus stop goes there. It's in the industrial park. I'm talking about people who are coming from Pascal and crossing Champlain to take the bus on the other side. No, because if they take the bus stop, they're taking it on Gauvin. They don't need to cross the street to get the bus. If they're on foot and they want to cross, well, there are people who take the bus there. maybe it doesn't happen all the time. Maybe they should be using another bus stop, perhaps, but there's no requirement for people who are crossing there to take the bus because the bus goes on Pascal and Gauvin. They could take the bus there. Okay, thank you. Councillor Genet. Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to lights, let me tell you a little bit about my wish list. To remind you, we had a discussion of redoing intersections. This has been mentioned several times at Amiro, Fox Street, Marguerite, and what year are we aiming to do that? And we talked about a roundabout a moment ago at Charlesville, Thomas, and Central. This is becoming more and more busy in the mornings. Is something going to be done soon for a roundabout there? Yes, these intersections are coming. Great, thank you. I think we can move on. The next point is calming traffic. If you've driven on some streets in Moncton recently, I'm thinking of Pleasant, Purdy, and Rosdale, they've installed speed cushions. There are 3 bumps, one after the other. They're like speed bumps, but the bumps are installed in such a way that an emergency vehicle can go between those. They don't have to slow down, but any other car has to go over the bumps, and so it slows them down. We're starting to see this in municipalities. It seems to work, and it's been discussed with the firefighters, discussed also with Public Works. There's an aspect which might be an issue, and that is snow clearing. We'll be checking that with Moncton this winter. To date, Moncton's had good feedback about these installations. They seem to work okay. Typically, cars can cross over them fairly comfortably at 40 kilometers an hour. But if they go faster at 60 kilometers an hour, they might damage their vehicles. We want to put these on Gaspé and Vanier Street. We'll begin with that next year. So it's like a pilot project. We'll be checking the speed beforehand and after we install them, and then we'll assess if these things work properly. They're called speed cushions. And in Moncton, they're on Purdy, not far from the 4 ice rinks, not far from Shediac Road, where there's a Y. You go on to Pleasant after the Y in the road, and then Lonsdale on the north side of Moncton, near Mountain Road. So I think they look good, and the cost benefit would be there. I think we had a budget of $100,000, so we're looking at a couple of places to install them. Questions? Questions? Councillor Brideau. Look, I don't want to be bothersome with the whole issue of speed bumps. I didn't do any research on speed cushions, but I wonder, why don't we install speed bumps like we have at Place Unie that can be moved? It's a speed bump, which is screwed into the pavement, and in the winter you can take them up. Oh, she's just shown me the speed cushion, because the Gaspé Park is about 25 feet before you take College Street. So for fire trucks, It's not a problem because you have to slow down when you get to College Street. If you want to turn, you have to slow down unless you want to go across Gaspé and go further. But there's a curve in the road there. And it's just a question of slowing down the cars when young people come out of the park. At the same time, those who are coming College Street and who start to speed up, they don't have any choice, but they're going to hit those bumps in some way. So the speed cushions could also work there. There's no doubt. Your Worship, if I may, this is a pilot project with two places. In 2025, there's probably going to be requests for further installations. So we're looking at it being effective for our human resources, those who install them and uninstall them in the parking lot at the aquatic center, we know is greatly used for that. So here we're looking at whether there's a solution for other places where we know that there are some challenges. So this is a mechanism which can work and stay there year round. So it's another benefit. We'll test it on the two locations we've heard the most about in the last couple of years, and we'll assess and see the results of the experiment. So we're going to be undertaking a good analysis. Let's continue. Are you at the end of your list? Yes, looks like it. Well, the last one. Plans and design for projects 2026. Oh, the map. Oh, that's right, the map. These are the projects that I mentioned. The majority of them are right here. I think you can see the colors pretty well. I didn't know if the pink or the red were going to be hard to discern. Later, Marie-Ève is going to present this. You have the water and sewage system, and in the left, you have the culverts in green. It's the same as previously. So it's a sanitary sewer, which is 3 feet in diameter. So 400 meters long. Before digging in the Chartersville Marsh, which is a provincial marsh or of provincial importance, the province may not even let us go and excavate in there. So to put a tube in there and blow it up, it's going to take the form of a culvert. You'll see it's a fairly expensive proposition, but it will allow us to reduce the impact on the humid lands or the wetlands and the environment. In green, you can see I had mentioned this for the Acadie Champlain project. To the intersection, it's not there because there were too many colors at Acadie, but on Champlain, from the intersection there, not far from McDonald, it's about the same thing. These sanitary sewer is a culvert. You have communication wiring through there and rainwater culverts too. It'd be difficult to dig in there, but you can see there are all kinds of projects throughout the city. It's fairly colorful in the northern part of the city because this is where there are a lot of culverts. There's some little bits and pieces. That pipeline network is up there. So it's a good year ahead. Dieppe Boulevard is long, but the micro servicing it gets done fairly quickly. Yes, beautifully colored. Any questions? None? Okay. Okay, I'll give the floor to my colleague then. Let's continue with 2025. So these are the other projects, the replacement project. My colleague, Mr. Luchu, has already presented this. So in fact, the 3 buses an articulated tractor, snow blowers, and the renovation of AJL. Mr. Como has already spoken about this for 5 million spent in 2025. Urban mobility, this is urban transit, active transit, and trails. So that's a big amount. Buying 2 new buses and trails, the ligne côtière, and there's a part between Midline and Dawson along Champlain is in the works, and bus shelters and collection boxes are on that list. For community development, 800,000 is provided for. It's a study on the market. So there are studies to be done in 2025 and also land purchases, not the same ones as my colleague, Mr. Cromie, has mentioned, but for trail development and land purchases for sporting fields. We have operation center equipment and industrial shelving and other uh, items are in this budget line. Anything else for capital budget? Councillor Chilchonova, thank you, Your Worship. In mobility, urban mobility, I have a question, maybe Luc can answer. We had mentioned at one point that we would be reviewing the Communauto program that we heard about in 2013 and to see if this is something we would like to integrate into our services for urban transit. Are there any developments to tell us about? I know you'd looked at this. And could this be part of the budget? That's my question. It's just a question of timing because I think this concept has a value and has merit, but to have a transit system that's related to this, it's not one or the other. It's a part of a whole. It's a question of timing. It's currently not in the 2025 budget, but we could do the steps and see how we could work with our partners, Kodiak Transpo and others. There's no money in the budget today, but it doesn't mean that the issue is dead. Great, thank you. The next slide is financing. This had been mentioned previously for the project on Dieppe Boulevard. Yes, it's there, Councillor Gadet. So we're presenting the costs for all the projects. These are the sources of financing. Operating capital for 2025 is a total of $9 million. Gas tax is 1.5 million. We covered on transportation projects. And then the amounts we use from our reserve accounts, 9.9 million. Contributions by governments and others is very high in 2025 because we have the major boulevard or Dieppe Boulevard construction and also the FCM program for AJL and loans or borrowing at 7.7 million, which is what's being forecast right now for 2025, for a total of $41.5 million for our upcoming project. Councillor Le Boutillier, thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to come back to this issue. It's a point of information. Is it possible in the future for urban mobility to have more details? Because we're talking about $5.2 million. And we talked about the others, but thank you. That's it.
Donnez-nous une réponse alors.
Inaudible comment. Mr. Richard? Well, we've ordered 5 buses, so we'll be officially buying them in 2025. So that's a big part of that amount. For 5.2 million, but you've also talked about trails. Yes, there's the trail alongside the river, so it's for the purchase of land and to make progress on that project. So, we're talking about an $8 to $10 million project that's in different phases. So that's also part of the 5.2 million. Right, thank you. But there were subsidies for the buses, right? Yes, absolutely. Okay, we're just talking about costs here. Okay. Right, that's it. All right, so for water and sewer, another question here. Councillor Godbout. I just wanted to, so it's 41.5 million dollars for the total general capital budget. And how much was it last year? What was the increase, or what is the increase this year? I don't have that with me. I don't know if my colleague can look that up. Maybe we can continue and I'll come back with the information. Yes, all the costs have gone up, and the number of projects as well that we're doing. But I don't have the yeah, and I was expecting an increase with the Dieppe Boulevard extension. But if we remove that, or there are more, are we really maximizing our capital projects? So are we limited by the number of people or the funding? Because we have room in our financing. So are we limiting what we're doing? And maybe that's more of a question for Marc. We have limited resources. I understand that, but what we're seeing is what we're able to do with the people we have, because we do have capacity to go and maybe get. But these amounts are based on our resources, right? Yes, it's based on our internal capacity and our financial partnerships when required. So we have financial partners for some of our projects, and that's all part of the equation. So yes, it's based on the capacity that we have for next year. Yeah, I'm asking the question because it's a follow-up to what I asked last week. We have a new government, and there's a potential new partner there. And I know a lot of your work is planning in advance. So, you can't just throw together a project in 2 weeks. We understand that. But sometimes we talked about, the fact that we have to reevaluate our projects when new partners come to the table. So will we have time for this new budget to look at that? And I wonder if you can give an example. Well, 2 weeks ago, we were informed that there was a new program for water and sewer that support new housing. So there may be a project that we can consider quickly to start next year. And this is not part of the current budget assessment process, but we'll take a look at that opportunity and we can get funding of up to 85%. So that could be part of our housing strategy. So that might be, that's something that might be a possibility. But, and sometimes we have to take action quickly. But yes, we do look at all the opportunities that come to us. My approach is we don't miss opportunities when we don't have to. All right, so if you could give me the amount from last year. So it's $33 million last year. So it's a big, this is a big increase this year, or for 2025 rather. All right, so for water and sewer, this will go quickly. This has already been presented by my colleague, Mr. Cormier, in terms of asset management and new projects. So actually, this is all, the only, this has basically been presented already. So the water vehicle and equipment replacement. And that's 800,000. And then Gauvin Road reconstruction, Champlain Street grading and paving, St. Thérèse water main replacement, Up Street, Grand P, Notre-Dame, La Tour d'Hippodo, water main replacement, sewer relining in the Chartersville, and we looked at that when we looked at the map. So that's 1.1 million just for that item line. And for the new project, so there's the pump replacement at the airport pumping station. It's due to be replaced. So there is also a new project is the bulk water station. And maybe I can ask my colleague to help me give a better explanation. But our water use is stable, but so I don't know if you have any questions, maybe my colleague can answer you. But and then we have the Dieppe Boulevard extension, and that's the water and sewer part is 3.0 million. Trottoir Lane, same thing, 1.5 million in 2025, and then the plans and specs for 2026. For a total of $10.7 million. And I think most of the questions have already been asked. So, okay, I don't see any further questions, so that's good. Keep on. All right, so in terms of financing for the water and sewer capital budget, so $1.3 million for transaction capital. The gas tax, as I mentioned earlier, we have $0.2 million per year. So we've got $600,000 contributions from the provincial, federal, and other entities, basically for Boulevard or Dieppe Boulevard, and so that cost will be covered by expansion Dieppe. So there will be some of the funds will be coming out of the reserves, so $10.7 million in total. Any questions? Okay, this is moving. We're moving along a little quicker here. All right, I will give this back to Mr. Cormier, and he will be talking to us about the projects for 2026. Okay, we're going to slow down again, I suppose, but. All right, so for 2026 now. So microsurfacing. So for 2026, we have part of Pascal and Dieppe Boulevard that will be resurfaced, or microsurfaced rather. It's really clear. I don't know if you have any questions for that. No, no questions. Okay. So we have provincial funds, 55% is covered for designated highways. So we're going to be doing Champlain Street between Lorette and the MFC, the Moncton Flight College. So again, there's a section that's in cast iron, so we'll be replacing, and I think it's about 300 meters in length. So there'll be some extra excavation work. And the city is 100% responsible for replacing that line there. Any questions on that one? Okay. Reconstruction of Sainte-Thérèse. That's phase 2. And this time it will be from Acadie to Notre-Dame. So again, a trail on the north side, new sewer and water lines. It's not more complicated than that. All right, keep on. Same thing, phase 2 of the Leblanc Road reconstruction. And this time it will be going from Dieppe Boulevard, so about 1 kilometer to the east, to the former city limits before before municipal reform. So the province will be managing that. So $2.4 million is just for the road itself and for the ditches as well. So 9 meters wide and a lane for the cyclists and pedestrians. Any questions about that? No? Okay. All right, and now I have a list of streets for asphalting of various streets. So in 2026, what we're looking at is, and you know, we try to stay in one section of the city. So a lot of these streets are in the same neighborhood. So Manon, Mandeville, Allard, Dolbeau, Grande Vallée, Jolicoeur, Chiasson, and Rideau. So those are the streets. So local streets. Any questions on that? I see no questions. And then plans and specs for our 2027 projects. In terms of new projects, there are Dieppe, there's the Dieppe Boulevard extension. There's phase 2 of the realignment of Thomas Street. So we're going to connect to Thomas to the roundabout that was installed this year. And in the realignment, we would connect with from north to south to Blanchard, Danny, and another street. And on Thomas Street, there would also be a multi-purpose trail. Any questions about the Thomas Street project? No? New traffic circles or traffic lights. So starting in 2027, we're going to start, we've got $1.1 million set aside here. So, and this will be repeated every year. We talked about Chartersville, the Chartersville intersection, Thomas, Central, and Pascal. And the other ones that we're looking at is the extent, as there's Dieppe and Yvonne, the intersection there. And there will be a connection to that intersection. So that's another intersection that we're looking at. We're not sure if we're going to install traffic circles or put traffic lights. I think, you know, we have to look at the option of roundabouts, but not every area is suitable to that. One example that I hear a lot about is Champlain and aviation. So aviation has a, you know, a steep elevation. It's not a great place for a roundabout, but in the future, we might have a traffic light. It'll depend on the traffic. You know, there's a formula that we use to determine if traffic lights are required there. But starting from 2027, we'll have this amount that keeps coming back. In 2026, we don't know if it'll be Dieppe Yvonne or Dieppe Chartersville, Pascal. We're assessing those locations right now. That might be the one that we focus on. But you know, from the information that we hear, that's the area that needs it most. But so we might do that work before development south of Chartersville continues. And so we're conducting evaluations, but I'm pretty sure we'll be using that full amount. And we had also talked about Amiro Fox Creek. We'll see in 2027. And I'll be talking about that in an upcoming slide, but that amount could also be used for improvements at that intersection, something short term. All right, so it's here, but there's nothing definitive for the moment. Any questions? I see no questions. I think, well, let's go to a new year. Well, we're almost done here. So new trails and sidewalks. I just want to take a look at my list here. So as previously mentioned, we're looking at installing trails and sidewalks, hopefully trails, but sometimes there are challenges. Sometimes we have to put sidewalks. So these are things that we're discussing, but we're looking at doing some on Champlain on the north side. From industrial to Midland, there is neither a trail nor a sidewalk. So, and then from Pascal to Champlain-Gauvin, and we may need to redo that intersection there too. That'll have to be determined. And then Hartnett as well, there's lots of development in that area. So we're starting to look at it, and we might propose something for 2026 in that location. But any questions with respect to this item? And there are some others coming in 2027. No questions. Questions, there'll be more questions next year. Yeah, I mean, next year is clearer, but you know, sometimes things move. Okay, so then purchase of land is the next item, and that's the Gauvin block. That'll affect the Gauvin block. And then we need our specs and plans for 2027. So I just want to see if there are any questions before I hand the mic back to my colleague. All right, thank you. We were kinder, we were gentler on you on the second time around. All right, so other. So replacement, so in 2026, what we're looking at replacing a pumper, so $3.2 million is almost a purchase. There are $300,000 for a new cars, a loader and a tractor. So those are included in that $3.2 million. Purchase of 5 new buses, $4.5 million. Purchase of new equipment. So a new sewer scraper, if you will, that we want to second one. We'll be buying a second one in 2026. And other pieces of equipment. So, and after, we're also looking at investing some money in Dieppe, about $2 million. For the leisure master plan, this amount, we don't have anything concrete to announce, but we set this amount aside to implement the leisure master plan. And then for the active transportation master plan, we're going to continue working on the Riverside Trail and buying land for other trails as well. So there's a lot of trails and purchase of land that is being planned. Is that okay? All right, continue. For water and sewer in 2026, again, these are projects that are continuing. So the Dieppe Boulevard extension and residential water meters, that's actually a new project. You have not yet made a decision on that, but we put it in the budget and there will be a presentation made at the beginning of next year on this item. There is a Dover Road collector sewer. We talked about that a little bit as well. Leveling and paving of Champlain Street, reconstruction of St. Therese, realignment of Thomas Street, equipment purchase. These are small purchases, about $100,000. I think it's a car we're looking at for 2026. And local operation of a well. That's another, to have another water source, and then plans and specs for 2027. Okay, continue. All right, so I'm going to present the sources of funding for water and sewer. It's the same principle as before. So operational capital, 9.4 million for general and 1.4 water sewage. So gas tax, $2.1 million for 2026. So 1.5 million and 0.6 million. In terms of contributions, provincial, federal, and other, $9.9 million, mainly for the Dieppe Boulevard extension and general and water and sewage. Reserve, we're forecasting $4.2 million and borrowing $14.4 million. It's a little bit difficult to determine the borrowing because we don't know what we're going to get in terms of subsidies. So total fixed assets for 2026, $39.4 million for the general budget and 11.4 for water and sewer. All right. All right, I'll hand the mic back to Mr. Cormier for the projects that are planned for 2027. Any questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. My question is for the 2026 sewer and water budget. So $1.5 million for the water meters. That's going to be done in phases. Yeah, it'll be done over a 3-year period. And we didn't, this is a project that's been kind of pushed back year after year. So if the project goes ahead, it may have a significant impact on the budget, but we're planning $1.5 million for the time. And if it goes ahead, then I'll have to adjust the budget. Great, thank you. Anyone else? Great, we'll continue. All right, so 2027 now. Microsurfacing. This will be done on Acadie, the section that we did the previous year, south of Champlain, and in the marsh area. And in the marsh, from the marsh, we'll go to Amiraux. Any questions? No questions? Grading and paving, Amiraux Street. From Fox Creek to Dover. And that's what had been requested at the province. We had made a request to the province in. Now, there may already, part of this project may already done with the boulevard, the Dieppe Boulevard extension, and then we'll have to change that $4 million amount in upcoming budget. So that remains to be, no, but that's what we'd asked the province for. That project would also include installing a water line. Any questions? Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. L'Amiraux from Fox Creek to Dover. So could we, Lorette, from Dover to the city limits? Well, part of that work will be done as part of the Dieppe extension. So maybe in 2027, maybe we'll just be doing what remains. We don't know when the other part is going to be done from Dover to the city limits. Do you know when that's going to be done? Well, a good part of that will be done by 2027. But if we have to replace the water lines from Dover to the city limits, a big part of Amiraux would be done. So we'll see what we can do to get all that work done. All right. Well, another question, since we're talking about that road. Fox Creek and Amiraux. Something's happening there. Yeah, we'll be talking about it in a couple of minutes. It's not yet decided, but maybe I'll wait till we get to that part of the presentation there before I talk about that. Right. Any questions for Amiraux Street? All right. Paving and concrete curb reconstruction of Appleton. We already talked about that. So here we're talking about 2027. We could look at maybe bringing it back, but that'll be, we'll have to make that decision later on. Any questions on Appleton? No? We're out of main replacement, Beau Séjour and Laurier. That is, we're looking at the tower on Notre Dame. And again, these are water lines in cast iron, or lines done in cast iron. So, and this also includes repaving as well. So we'll be doing that, wherever we do restructuring work, we'll repave that entire section. All right, Chartersville, I talked about this already a little earlier. Here we're talking about 225 meters from Dieppe Boulevard going and heading west. There are a number of breaks in the main, and while we're doing that work, we will I think we're talking about 700 meters that work will be done on. Any questions on that? Let's move on. Paving of various streets. So I've listed a number of streets. So for 2027, we're looking at Chartersville from Centrale to Bourg. And then I know we've already done Chartersville between Pascal and Dieppe. Maybe we could look at something there. So Chartersville, Centrale, Bourg, Centrale from Chartersville to Francel, Belleforêt to Peuplier, and then Papineau, the cul-de-sac. So that's what's being proposed for 2027. Any questions on that? No questions. All right, plans and specs. Now, and this is the last part of the Dieppe Boulevard extension. So we're going to use up the entire envelope. So it's a $42 million project. So this will be the last part of that amount. And the boulevard extension may extend to 2027. Hopefully it'll open to the public in 2026, but that may not be the case. So improvements to Dieppe Boulevard, Champlain to Chartersville. This would be improving each intersection and a widening. So we'd start south of Chartersville and we'd go all the way up to Champlain. We're starting to see an increase in traffic. Last year we did an assessment. We had a firm do that assessment and they made recommendations and they gave us a cost estimated, and that's what we're presenting here. And that'll fit in with the other construction work in the area, but we're looking at adding one lane of traffic and certain turning lanes as well, and at various intersections. So that'll be a big project, but any questions on that? No, no questions. Purchase of land, same thing. There's an amount for Gauvin Block. And then there's an amount for downtown, the Gauvin Block, so the east-west. So we've already done from Marché to Evolution, or Market to Evolution. In this project, we would finish up the remaining streets in Gauvin Street. So, and then there's a bit of improvement work to do with the sewer lines and in that area. So we're looking at completing that work in 2027. Any questions for that point? Continue. Okay, this one I talked about, the $1 million for new traffic circles or traffic lights. So we're looking at the same potential intersections. So we want to look at how the intersection. So once the Dieppe Boulevard extension is complete, in this extent, that there is an issue with this particular intersection, and we think that once Dieppe Boulevard will be open to the public, a lot fewer people will be using this intersection. So we don't want to make a big investment in this intersection, and then so we're going to see what we can do before to improve that intersection and how it operates. But if in 2027, if we see that traffic lights aren't required, there are crosswalks and maybe even trails that will be installed. But there's work to be done for sure at that intersection. So we're aware of it. We're keeping an eye on it. And maybe even next year, we'll see if there's something that we can do. Maybe not a temporary fix, but something we can do quickly and less expensively but we've set aside an amount in 2027 just in case we have to do major work at that intersection.
Question pour celle-là?
Any questions for that item? There aren't any. Sidewalks and pedestrian crosswalks. We're looking at Aucoin Street and Gaspé for 2027, and a pedestrian crosswalk on Champlain between the market and College Street near Evolution. Once again, it's there for 2027. We're not sure what's going to happen with Champlain later. I think it is operational. I can tell you right now, for the operating budget, we can evaluate Champlain from industrial to Paul Street and what it might look like in a few years. It's been discussed previously here in the past, but it's the city center, and we want to get as many cars as possible out from the center and put them as quickly as possible on Highway 15 and eventually by extending Paul Street. So we want a consultant to do an assessment and do traffic modeling and a complete assessment of what Champlain is going to look like in the coming years. That's why the Champlain crossing, a little bit later, we're at 3 lanes or more. We're keeping an eye on things, but it could be that we don't do anything with Champlain. We talked about Paul Street and traffic lights or just the flashing lights. But there's an amount set aside for that in 2027. Between Gaspé and Aucoin Streets. Questions? Continue. The last one is in 2027. I propose that we undertake a study of environmental impact to extending Paul Street. It would go from Champlain to the intersection with Acadie and Alain Gillette. Paul Street is going to be a huge project because it crosses wetlands that are provincially important. And it's going to require a study of this type. Extending Paul Street is going to be a major project. And it's possible that it would be the big project that we undertake once we finish Dieppe Boulevard. With the traffic we're seeing currently in the city, we should keep the option of doing that. And it's going to be part of the assessment that we do in coming years. But we don't want to lose sight of the fact that Paul is necessary, and we want to undertake a study of environmental impact study for Paul Street. You know, if I say that we've been talking about it for 10 years now, so I think you can continue on doing that. I remember when I was young, there were maps from 1980 that showed the extension. But you're not young. So that's it for 2027. Are there any other questions, or are we okay? So I'll leave the floor to my colleague. Thank you. We're getting there. Water and sewage capital budget, the replacement program of what's provided for in 2027 is a Zamboni, a John Deere to replace, and also a tandem snow clearer. There's a dumpster that's also provided for. The Dieppe market, we're going to be continuing to put some money in that. This project is going to be staged over several years, 4 million in 2027. Recreation master plan. There's the continuation of the master plan. Nothing specific there yet, but we expect to be investing some money in the master plan for recreation and also active transportation master plan. you see the sideline, which is extended now over several years, and the implementation. So where are we going to need to put trails and so on? Are there any questions about other issues for 2027? For water and sewer in 2027, the replacement program, another vehicle has to be changed in 2027. Extending Dieppe Boulevard continues. A water tower in 2027. This is higher than previous years. And water meters, another 1.5 million in 2027, extended over several years. The other projects have already been talked about by my colleague. So leveling and paving Amiro, replacing Appleton culverts, Beauséjour and Laurier replacement of culverts, water mains, and also another thing for the lifting station, plans and estimates for 2028 projects and strategic projects for 2027. So some funding has been set aside for these specific things. So once again, were there any questions about that? No, continue. Financing rates for 2027. So operation capital 9.9, water and sewage 1.6, gas tax, we put it in the general account for $2.2 million, contributions, government levels, and others. Dieppe Boulevard is a huge piece for water and sewage, reserves 3.3, and once again, loans are high in 2027. We're going to try and bring this down by getting more subsidies as much as possible. As Mr. Melange has said, once we get a little bit of funding, if we are allowed to get some, we'll go and find it. Continue. Oh, question. Generally speaking, I was waiting to the end because there are two things that I wanted to identify and that came out through the presentation. So land purchases, I heard it mentioned here and there. I tried to do calculations and add it all up, but overall, for land purchases, is there an amount comparable to last year, or is it higher than last year? It changes from one year to the next. We try to be consistent from one year to the next, but some years we try and get lands if they're available. This is what we did. We trying to say that we've got the option to do it if the opportunity comes up. Last year, we had targeted that we wanted to have amounts for land purchases. Is there a comparable amount this year where there is work to be done in 2027 or 2025? 25, 26, 27 is what I'm looking at. So 2025, I'm looking at it globally over the 3 years you've presented. I was waiting to see because sometimes you can get one year and less the next, but I wasn't able to tell from the presentation what the plans were with regard to land purchases. Could you say a little bit about that? If not you, then maybe someone else. Well, look, but in 2025, we've targeted more lands. We are going to put some aside for various opportunities. Mr. Richard, yes, I think Marie-Ève has correctly explained the issue of opportunity, but as you know, there are things right away that we're working on that are not necessarily public. So it all turns around these projects that we're talking about. So active transportation, community development, it's all based around those items. Depending on what happens in the coming months, in the coming 6 months, we'll have better information about our future needs. But it's basically what's happening with regard to what we've discussed. Well, in my case, the public aspect of the comment is to the effect that I see the importance of investing in land purchases in the future. I'm talking about 5, 10 years, 20 years down the road, not just 25, 26, 27, but we invest for later on when we're no longer here. So there'll be amounts in the budget that are available, and this is something that be set aside. That's my comment. Yes, I think that what we've said to the council is in the coming years, we're going to be very proactive as well and to forecast what space we're going to need, either community development or active transportation, because we know that it's always easier to acquire lands right now than in 10, 15, and 20 years because of the growth we're seeing now. This is why we had put a focus on some land purchases in the coming years. But I think that, it's always a possibility in the future of, depending on the master plan for recreation or active transportation, as Marie-Ève is going to be talking about amounts, but sometimes these amounts for specific projects, others are for land purchases, depending on the situation and the context that we find ourselves in. If I may, Your Worship, we're talking about a new school that's going to be happening. If we want to be partnering with lands neighboring that, we need some green spaces with the schools and the opportunities that happen with these projects. We're talking about the recreation master plan, and we are looking at opportunities there. Thank you. I fully agree with regard to infrastructure and what we're seeing in the future. I know we can't build an arena next year, but if there's other infrastructure, we're going to need land for that. My second question is,
Les infrastructures
I'm
sanitaires.
trying to see where we have what's happening in Lakeburn Park and sanitary installations, and if there are toilets provided for. In the master plan, I said there was 2 million that hadn't been specified. In this idea, we hadn't specified this, but we're reserving some funds and setting them aside for that. Mr. Richard, the intention is to be able to work on a concept for 2025 and then present the concept. And if the concept is going to be done phase by phase or all in one throw, and we're looking for financing and so on. So in 2025, we hope we are able to come up with a concept to be able to present to you, which will also include these sanitary services. I reiterate the point that I've already made with regard to a city where we welcome families. Families want to be close by. We want to support. We want sport tourism. We need high quality infrastructure for these services. We don't have it right now in Lakeburn, and I think the family would benefit from that. Thank you. That's it? Yes, we're done. Thank you. Okay. What do we have? Another 15, 20 minutes left? Your Worship, the treasurer hasn't yet spoken. Let's take a 15-minute break.
Alors, on continue avec le grand Manitou.
Let's continue with the big boss and the microphone. Good evening again. And this year, we're sorry that both presentations are happening in the same night. So capital and operating. So normally capital is 1 week and operating is the next week or a couple of weeks later. But with the restrictions from the province, we didn't have the figures to move forward in our budget. And so we put both of these presentations at the same time. So let's look at the operating budget for water and sewage in 2025. What we see here is that the rates will not change. We're at $948, but with regard to water, if you look at the 476 increases to 500, so we're increasing the water portion by $24 and bringing the sewers down, so the final amount doesn't change. You can see that we have done no change since 2020. And really, why we haven't done any change is that the new units are adding to these budgets, and it means that it compensates for cost increases. So we're keeping things pretty stable for the time being. With regard to revenues, the total budget is 16 million, and compared to last year, it was also 16 million. The water income is 6.9 million compared to sewage income at 6.2. The general fund will continue to contribute with 2 million. Last year it was 2.2 million. And you'll see in the coming slides that it was higher for a period of 4 years in order to absorb the loss that happened in water and sewage in 2019 and that we absorbed in 2021 until 2024. So revenues in 2025, it's done. We don't have to talk about it anymore. It's all been absorbed through budgets. This is the reason why we can finance or not increase the rate for water and sewage, because there was a major expenditure that has disappeared on that side. So, as I said a moment ago, the 2024 budget was 16.10 million, and so it's now 16, so it's not much change there. In 2024, we had a $16.1 million. Take out the transfer to the reserve. These are the amounts that we have once in the year, so they're not there the next year. The transfer of reserves from 860,000 rather, and the one-time of expenditure, which are not happening again, of 370,000. So the base budget is $14.87 million. From there, the next slides will show you what is happening, how we went from 14.8 to 16.2. The one-time of level 3 expenditures are $200,000 in 2025. New is N2 are 340,000. Transfers to the reserve of 610,000, and existing expenditures N1 have not changed. However, there were some huge increases and huge reductions, so it came out to zero. So let me show you that right now. With regard to the one-time N3, I said 200,000, so the real figure is 197,000. There's a one-time of 80,000, which was a study to implementing a well for water source. So we looked at that. 25,000 was a consultation, T1 for projects 2025. I'll let Sean talk about during the next presentation with regard to general operation, because the TI was 50,000. So this is 25. So I'll wait till the next presentation so Mr. Degg can tell you a little bit more about that in further detail. And then 92,000 of an expenditure that were put forward to 2025. So we didn't have a chance to do the work. So the money is in reserve. We're just going to do the work the following year. I have the list for you in the next slide. With regard to new items, N2, these are expenditures that happen every year, so they never end. These expenditures are 340,000 for new requests for human resources. Once again, I'm going to ask Ms. Barriot to do a presentation on this, but the next general budget. So I could have started with the general operating budget, but it's really a detail that you'll see when we do that presentation. So it's the portion of new human resources, 340,000 for the level for water and sewers, and 5,000 for a lift station, the operating cost for a new lift station at aviation, which is aviation number 2. With regard to transfers to the reserves, 860,000, is an amount of $290,000. This is the financial plan. As soon as we get the surplus, the first thing we do with it is that we send it off to reserve funds. But the 2025 budget that I'm giving you show an anticipated surplus. So we have more revenue than expenditures in the amount of $320,000. This amount, I propose that we send it off to the reserve fund. It's going to be used next year in order to maintain the costs. that is, not let them get too high. So it's going to be kind of a stabilization reserve in order to ensure that next year I won't have to increase costs with regard to water and sewage. Right now, I think there might be an increase of $8, but I'll be talking to you at the end of this presentation about that. Are there any questions before I go to the next slide? Councillor Brideau, thank you, Your Worship. When you talk about this first item, implementing a well at the water source, what do you mean by that exactly? I'll let Mr. Bourque answer that question. Good evening. Thank you for this question. You know that we have a water source with 3 wells that we're actively watching every day. And the idea here is to give us ourselves a budget to assess what it's going to take if we want to locally have one well. So it's emergency measures that we're talking about here to see what it takes. Do we need a building? Do we have to wire it up? Do we have to build another road? If ever one day we needed to use some kind of well on the site to deliver water or in case of an emergency. So we're undertaking a study to see what this might mean. So this is the initiative here. There are three wells, and that means that we would like to develop one at a given point. Thank you. I've tasted the water at one of those small wells, and we're doing a test. And Councillor Gaudette had organized a visit for us, and I approached when they were bringing the water out or letting the water flow for 24 hours. I said, "Can I drink that water?" And the fellow said, "You will never drink such a good quality, clean water coming out of that well." Great. Let's move on. No further questions? And so the one-time expenditures that we set back to 2024, the master plan was 60,000. So some was spent in 2024, 2020, 22,000 will be sent. So there's a conversion at the airport. We didn't do it in 2024. So we propose to do it in 2025. And a pre-design study for the pumping station north of Melanson Street. We had an amount of 75,000. We did $45,000 worth of work. So there's another $30,000 to be spent in 2025. Now for existing expenditures. So current expenditures, which continue, you can see here that there is no increase, no change. It's like a zero increase, but there are some big increases and big decreases. First of all, there's $130,000 for salary increase. With the amounts in the budget with regard to union agreements and so on, there was $130,000 for salaries in water and sewage. The second item, $370,000 with regard to a water purchase from the city of Moncton. That is, it went from 50 cents to 59 cents, so 9 cents for each cubic meter, and we buy 3.4 million cubic meters. So there's also an increase in the quantity of water that we buy from the city of Moncton. So it's a doubling effect. It gives us an expense of $370,000. For your information, this is the first time since 2012 that we budgeted for more than 3.4 million cubic meters from the city of Moncton. So even if the city has increased since 2012, this is the first time we've gone beyond that 3.4 million cubic meters. It's fairly impressive when you look at it. We budgeted at 3.5 million because of the quantities of water that was used last year. With regard to operating capital and equipment replacement program, we're continuing to set money aside, $160,000. Transaqua, the unit rate, as you saw during the presentation, say that $210 a unit, but there are more units, so it's normal for it to increase to 130,000. And there's $125,000 of operational expenses, engineering or public works or these kinds of things. So it represents an amount of $125,000. With regard to the service of the debt, once the debt disappears, this debt that we had acquired in 2004 for 20 years, it ended in 2024 for $3.8 million, and the payments were $250,000 per year. So that is now done. It's been reimbursed. That's why we have no increase there, and we didn't have to borrow any. We have no considerable amounts that we have borrowed. And the last one, this is the one that I wanted to say, which is finally disappearing from the budget. It's been there since 2021. We've amortized this loss that occurred in 2019 at the cost of $675,000 per year for 4 years. It's the last year we see it, and so it freed up $675,000 in the budget. And this is the reason why the existing expenditures have had no have suffered no effect. Question, Councillor Goodbout. So it's thanks to this 900,000 that we didn't have to spend in the past year that we are maintaining the rates, because 675,000 of deficit, which is amortized, but we did that over 5 years. So was it 675 last year or 675 over 5 years? It was $2.7 million over 4 years, which was $675,000 per year over 4 years. So a little over 900,000 that we're not paying this year, the debt service and the rest. Yes, there's, as you say, there's some $900,000. That's why we can maintain the rate. Yes, that was a big, which may not be there next year. It will not be there next year. So this is an overall view, a 10,000-foot overview of the main expenditures and what's had an impact on the budget with regard to salaries. So it went up to went up by $470,000. And so water purchases, $370,000. There was an increase. Wastewater treatment, $130,000. Operating capital, $1.73 million that we put into our assets. So an increase of 160,000. Debt service, which reduces by 240,000. So we paid down that 2.2 million. Water and sewage operations haven't changed much. A little bit of a decrease. Transfers to reserves, there was a reduction. That is to say, last year we transferred about 900,000. It'll be about 610,000, which is a surplus from previous years, and the surplus we are expecting in this budget. So we have a little more income than expenditures budgeted. So there is going to be sent to the reserve. And the last is deficit from previous years, which is finally disappearing from our books. And we have a budget of $16 million for 2025. Lastly, with regard to water and sewage, I'll tell you what is the forecast for the next 5 years. So we've gone through 2025. You can see it here. For 2026, there will be a small increase of $8, so a 1% or 0.8% increase. 2027, 1.8%, so a $16 increase, and so on for subsequent years, about $16 per year for those years as well. This is due to the fact that the number of units, there was an increase of 3% per year. It's a little, I want to be a little more conservative, although I'm not supposed to express it that way. I'm being prudent here, but we've had some great years in the last 2 or 3 years, higher than the 3% increase. So if this continues and we have more units than I'm budgeting for, it may be that we don't need to increase the rates for those years. It will depend on the number of units that come into play. The operating budget goes from 16 million to 8.5. Capital projects, the first 3 years, you can talk about $10 to $11 million, and it goes down in 28, 29, But according to my experience, once we get to 2027, I'm pretty sure that in 2028 and 2029, there will be more projects than those were 3.8 and 7.2 million, but we'll see that. And with regard to borrowing, it moved from 2.7 to 4.7 in 2027, go down in 2028, which means that the debt ratio increases a little bit. It goes up to 16% in 2027, and then a little higher in 2028, it goes up to 17%. With regard to the debt ratio, we can go up to 50%. So we're well under what the province has set as a maximum of debt ratio. But the financial plan, which is not yet here, which I would have liked to work on, but I haven't had a chance to, I want to do it at the beginning of the year as much as generally speaking as water and sewage. So what we do for water and sewage, well, we don't have it. It doesn't exist. So it's the practice that I have been using for many years that we want to be under 25%. I'm looking at about half of what the province allows us to do. So the province allows 50%. What I'm going to propose is 25%.
Ça complète la présentation au niveau
And that
de l'eau.
completes my presentation. Any questions? Councillor Godbout, in your forecast, we had a presentation by Transaqua a few weeks ago saying that they were maintaining their rates, but they were anticipating infrastructure needs in the future. So in your planning, are you planning on just a stable rate for Transaqua, or are you expecting an increase? Right now, I'm anticipating that the same rate will continue for the next 3 or 4 years. But yes, they are talking about expensive project or work in the future. But there is $5 or $6 million coming in every year to their budget. So their cash flow is going up every year. So will they be using that to manage their assets? I don't think they use all of that amount, but there is money that they can put aside for future projects. So I think that the $210 rate should continue unless they come up with other capital projects, but I don't expect that today. Councillor Leboutier. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have an information question. Are the meters, have they been taken into, is that in your forecast? Yes. So in terms of capital projects, we talked to you about we presented from our projects from 2025 to 2027, and meters were included in that. So if we don't go ahead with the meter project, it'll be $1.5 million in borrowing that would be removed every year. All right. Anyone else? Any other questions? Let's continue. All right, just give me a few seconds here. Now we'll talk about the operating budget. All right, so here is the general operating budget for 2025. So the first 2 slides present a summary of the following 23 slides. So I'm going to really go and focus on the key items in the first two slides, and then I'll come back in more detail in subsequent slides. So for 2025, we are forecasting $6.2 million in new income coming to the city. $9.2 million is linked to the 12.8% increase in property assessment. So we are the municipality that grew the most. We saw double-digit growth. So we are going through a very positive period. Now these are big increases in population. So in the city, most residential houses, there's a 25% difference between the assessed value and the market value. So in this year, 2025, the value of most houses increased by 10%. So to reduce that by 5%, by reducing the tax rate by 6.5 cents, most residents won't be paying any more than 5%, than a 5% increase in their property taxes. Now the exception is properties where the provincial cap does not apply. So new houses, new purchases, where it's not an increase, but it's the price that's being paid. And so there are two important things that the province did this year. One, when they calculate the property assessment for the following year, when they did the evaluation or the assessment in October, it would be based on January prices. But they've changed their way of doing that now. So now last year when I was presenting the budget, it was just the value of the property as of January. But this year, it's still based on the January 2024 values, whereas we're in a transition year. Now, the difference is that when I presented that last year, we were in October 2024. So 2023. They didn't have the data. They only had them till the month of May. So the increase in the property assessments from May to December 2024, next year it'll be based on the year that has that passed. But so in October 2023, there was an attempt to assess the value of houses as of January. So that's the first change. The province changed its way of calculating assessments. Secondly, the 10% maximum that the province had imposed now applies to more than just residences. It applies to apartment buildings and to businesses as well. So on all properties in Dieppe, whereas before it was focused, it was exclusively on residential units. So those are two big changes that the province made. But despite all that, we still saw a 12.8 increase in property assessment. If we divide that into two, there's about 5% that applies to new construction and 7 to 8% that is related to the assessment value that increased. So that's what makes up the 12.8% increase. So we talked about the 9.2%. There is a $3.6 million reduction. Then there are an increase in non-tax revenues, building permits, investments, and I'll go a little bit more into detail later on. And then there was a decrease in the funding subsidy. So under the former government, they abolished this funding and they abolished it for a 4-year period. So this is our second last year, and last year will be theoretically the last time that we can count on that payment. So we have new income of $6.0 million. So what are we going to do with that $6 million? So first of all, we have, so of the $6.2 million, we have $2.4 million, so a 29% increase for the Kodiak of RCMP. So the RCMP represents about 11% of our budget, but with the new money that we have, our salaries have gone up by 1.8 million. And these are there are new positions, and there are salary increases as well, about half and half. So $1.8 million for that item. There's an increase of $1 million in the public transit system. Public transit is about 2% of our budget, but we put about 15% of our new money to an item that is only worth 2%. So with the RCMP and the budget, that's 50% of the amount that goes towards about what represents 13% of the budget. So these are big amounts, and then that, which means that there's less money for other items. Operating capital and replacement program, 1.1 million. And like water and sewer, there is borrowing that has expired. So there's $1.6 million for other expenditures, and I won't go into detail because I'll be talking about later in other slides. And then 1.5 decrease in the in transfers to reserve, and that $1.5 million, I'll talk to you a little bit about it right now. Is that last year our revenues were a little bit higher than our expenditures, so we took the remaining money, we transferred it to the reserve, so we budgeted to do that. And then in April of this year, when we issued the bids for construction and capital projects, we used that $1.5 million. So part for the roundabout that's in Gauvin, because the costs were higher than expected, and another $700,000, $800,000 for Aviation Boulevard. So the extension of that boulevard, so we came to see you to ask for more money, and that's where we took that money from. So it benefited us, and it benefited us then, and it benefits now in this budget. So I can balance my budget now at $6.2 million in new expenditures. So even with the tax rate reduced by 6.5 cents. So these two slides are a summary of the details. And now I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about it. I don't know if are there any questions before I continue. Councillor Leboutier. With regard to the $1 million increase in the public transit system, when Kodiak Transpo came to do a presentation, they were talking about $2 million. They were talking about $2.7 million. So could I get a bit more information on that? What was the budget last year compared to now? The budget was $1.7 million, and now we're proposing to go to $2.7 million. So that's the $1 million difference. So we're going to be, that means that we're going to be increasing our budget for that item by about 40%. Well, could we get some more details on that? Yeah, in my presentation, I will be talking about it there. So yes, Mr. Aubé will be able to answer a little bit more, give you more details. Okay, carry on. All right, so the 2024 rates, current rate is $1.43. We propose reducing it to 136.50. So a 4.5% decrease, or a decrease of 6.5%. For Greater Lakeburn and Scoudouc, we propose to maintain the 5% change, and so their rate will go from 59.45, and in Scoudouc of 51.92 to 56.92, Scoudouc, and 64.45 in Greater Lakeburn. On the next slide, I'm going to go in a little bit more detail. I'm going to explain why we're going to maintain the increased rate, even if we are decreasing the rate in the former city of Dieppe. So the province asked us the shared service rate and the local service rate. And shared service rate is a rate that everybody has to share. So everybody in Dieppe, new residents, so the LSDs of Scoudouc and Greater Lakeburn. So we calculated the shared service rate at 0.735. So, and if we go back to so Greater Lakeburn and Scoudouc are not yet at that rate. So we're going to raise their rate by 5% just until they reach the shared service rate of 0.735. So what are shared services? Well, government services, transportation. We have the recreational, leisure, and cultural services as well, our pools, our arenas, our parks. So that's included under the shared. And emergency measures as well, fire and police. And in fact, the police, the provinces send us a bill for police services. So LSDs, and they pay that through their shared service rate. And then other expenses, planning, development, waste. And then we reduce, well, there's also shared revenues that these entities can partake in. So again, the final rate, we calculated at 0.735. That's the rate that everybody should be paying. But Greater Lakeburn and Scoudouc are not yet there. So we'll be increasing their rate by 5 cents a year until they reach that rate. And that's the maximum that the 5% or 5 cents is the maximum that the province allows for an increase. Local services include transportation. Now, there is a water cost transfer. So this is for water and sewer services to compensate for the fact that the fire department uses water. So debt and capital, so all the debt that has been incurred by the city of DL, the two LSDs have not incurred those expenses. So for the time being, they're not paying those costs. But as we go forward, maybe a small portion will be going to their side. They'll start sharing in upcoming debts that we incur. And it's the same thing for other transfer to reserve and grants. And then we reduce the local revenues transfer from the reserves. So that gives a local services rate of $0.63. I don't know if you have any questions on that, on this slide. Councillor Gaudette. Thank you. I think I understand, but I just want to make sure. So here in the city, or in the LSD, if they didn't have service, they would pay 63 cents and not 73. Is that, I understand that? The maximum calculated amount is that the LSC should be paying 73 cents, but they're not paying those yet. But they're going. So are you when you're talking about utilities, are you talking about water and sewer? No, no, I'm talking about the services that we have. Waste collection, for example, hasn't that started? It's just that I'm going to get those questions there, so I want to be able to answer. Well, they're not paying for services that they don't use. So transit, for example, they don't pay for the cost of water but they don't have water and sewer services either. So they're just paying for the services that they have. And that's calculated at 73.5 cents, but they're not at that rate yet. Okay, thank you. All right, let's carry on. Right, this is a slide that I show you every year, and it evolves every year, changes every year. But the idea is to give you an overview of a typical residence and how its value has evolved over time. So initially, there was 25% of difference between what the property was worth versus what it was being taxed at. So in 2025, that amount went down to 16% because there is a 10% that was removed, or that is removed. So that property today, or in 2024, was taxed as if it was worth $399,000, even if it was worth $500,000. So that property that was taxed at $399,000 will be taxed at $439,000 this year, but it's only gone up by 5%. But the municipality can still go and get another 10% if that property continues to increase in value by 5%. However, the tax rate will be $5,900, well, roughly $6,000. If we had not, otherwise they would have been paying $6,277 if we had not decreased the amount by 10%. And that's basically what happens for every resident. So that 10% will be so if we don't want residents to, if we don't want them to have to pay more than 5%, we have to reduce the tax rate to arrive at that 5% figure. Any questions?
No, pas de question.
Okay.
There are no questions. So it's the same story for the non-residential rate. Here we're talking about the commercial rate. The apartments is another rate. I didn't give this to you because the 4 or 5 rates I could have given you, I stopped at 2. So I've given you the residential rate, and this is the non-residential rate, which is essentially the commercial rate. So they have a rate to establish what the non-residential rate is. It's increased by 1.65 for the, so 1.43 last year is 165, a net of 235.95. This year, they're revising the residential rate by 6.5 cents by 1.65 rather. This rate is now 2.25. So it's a reduction of 4.5% for the non-residential rate. However, the total bill also have a provincial portion that the residential doesn't have. But the provincial, to what I know now, could change, but it should be the same as last year. So it's 185.60. So if this figure doesn't change, the final result for them at this point is a reduction of 10.7 cents, yes, but it would represent a reduction of 2.5% because the non-residential portion stays the same. So their rate should go from 421 to 411 in rounded figures. That's a non-residential rate for the city of Dieppe and the provincial rate. Continue. Yes. So the total budget for 2025, we're looking at $85 million. And the increases, well, you can see the increase of $5.4 million for property taxes. The finance subsidy is going down from 0.4 to 0.2. And the last part is 200,000. So the other revenues increase from 7.6 million, increased by 1.1 million. And I have more details, I think. Let me tell you, sometimes I don't remember if I've said it or not, but the other expenditures we talk about, construction permits, subdivision permits, interests on investments, for example, the construction permits we had budgeted a certain amount. We're already beyond that with 750,000 too. So we've doubled the budget. So I increased that one to 1 million. The same thing for subdivision permits. I increased that one also by 40 or 50,000. So I have about $300,000 related to permits for construction and subdivisions. I also have increases for interest on investments because we have more and more money in reserve, which generates more interest income. There is also, with regard to, I'll give you the one-time items. The first time is one of the first times it's ever happened to me. We've also provided for grants for some one-time expenses. So these grants are part of the other income and the amount of $200,000 here. So let me go into more detail. For Greater Dieppe, the portion of Dieppe itself increased by 71.8 million. So this is just Dieppe. I said it was 12.8%, but for the Dieppe portion alone, the former Dieppe limits, it was 12.5%. So that's the increase. You can see the decrease of 6.5 cents, which was 3.6 million. But for Great Lake Burn and Skuduk increased by 19.3%. So if we take the weighted amounts for that tax rate, it comes back to what I said to you earlier. So this is new money coming in when we talk about $5.4 million. With regard to other income, there's a surplus from 2023, which is a little lower than 2022, so a reduction of 220,000 there. Transfers to reserve is 2.07 million, and transfers to the reserve are 100% of the amounts, the one-time amounts requested for 2025. That means for all one-time amounts, the one-shot deals are financed 100% by the reserve fund. So they appear as an expenditure on the operating budget, but they appear as a revenue transfer from the reserve to finances. So the line I'm showing you here is really income, which is transfer from the reserve to finance the one-time projects. So income from Rinks and Aquatic Center have gone up a little bit by about $60,000 total. Construction permits, as I mentioned earlier, increased by $290,000. Lodging tax remain unchanged, so 3% that we get from the 4 hotels that we have in Dieppe, and other revenues. which I've already mentioned to you, interest on our investments and one-time grants. So there's an increase of 1 million for a revenue of 6.6 million. Any questions before I come to expenditures? Doesn't seem to be any.
On prend de l'eau. Donc, au niveau des dépenses, un
So
peu
with regard to expenditures, as I did with water and sewage,
avec le budget de l'année précédente, donc de 79,1
look at the preceding year's budget of 79.1 million, take out the reserve and the one-time expenditures
pour arriver à un budget de base de
to
75 millions.
get a base budget of $75.4 million.
On arrive à un budget
And from that, we get a total budget of 85.3 million. So there's a $10 million of new expenditures, if you will. These new expenditures are transfers to the reserve. So 400,000 for 2025. And I have in the coming slides, you'll see one-time N3, which are financed from the reserve. But now I'm talking about these amounts, one-time amounts of 2.3 million, new items. So what are these new things? We're talking about a $3 million amount. With regard to asset management, 0.9 million, and existing expenditures, N1, which are at $3.3 million. So these are expenses that are existing from 2024. With regard to the detail, with regard to transfers to the reserve, from 2024, we had a $2.1 million budget, which was really composed of two amounts, a 600,000 of surplus from 2022 that we sent to reserve according to our financial plan, but also the $1.5 million, as I explained earlier, which was the fact that I had more revenue budgeted than expenditures, which we set aside and we used it for two capital projects. And compared to the 2025 budget, the 400,000, which was the surplus from 2023, which is being sent to the reserve fund. The second point with regard to expenditures are one-time expenditures for 2025 in the amount of $2.3 million. I divided them into three components. The new expenditures requested in 2025 in the amount of $1.2 million. We're talking about one-time requests for 2024 that had not been done and that were carried over will continue in 2025 to the amount of $655,000. And the building renovation program that we explained to you earlier, which is annual budget of $350,000, but we provided renovations in the order of 700,000. So we're looking for an amount of $410,000 more in order to fund that $700,000 renovation budget. Now, I'm going to ask for help from my colleagues because I came at some points. We're talking about one-time N3. So for 2025, with regard to changes to the City Hall, $90,000. In summary, we want to make room for new employees who are going to be joining us and connected to City Hall. And just here behind me on the first floor, we want to reassign the office space. With regard to the radiator for the ice ring, it's a item we want to have on the shelf in case it breaks. It's there. We can fix that ice oval so we can keep it in service. The Uniplex valve, $50,000, needs to be replaced every 5 years. We're in year 5 for Uniplex, so 50,000 to replace valves at Uniplex. The three next items are environment related, and I ask Mr. Touchant to tell you about them. Thanks, Stéphane. Good evening. As you know, we're a new service in the city, so we require strategic planning. The first item is the study of the ecology network, and it's my colleague from planning who wanted to review it. So we wanted to get as much information as possible for ecology issues to redefine a municipal plan, how we include our natural assets and connectivity between habitats, protection of waterways, etc. So this is an expansion of what we were doing with a secondary plan in the expanded area of Dieppe, with the plan provided by Community College of New Brunswick. So our own contribution would be of $100,000 over 2 years, so $50,000 for 2025. Any questions? Great. A plan for sustainable development. I'm sorry, a plan for urban forest. We want to gather all the information about the various initiatives and what we need to do in order to be as effective as possible for our urban forest. The city of Fredericton has just published very recently this, if you're interested to see what comes out of this kind of management plan. We're talking about proactive management and what we have to prioritize our plantings. Any questions about that? Okay. And finally, the Sustainable Development Plan and ecological transition, our sustainable development plan was fairly thin. So because we want to reduce our greenhouse gases, we want to transform our energy consumption, be it with my colleagues in building renovation or at the community level, how we organize and more active transportation or urban transit. So we want to define where our the barometer is for our actions. Okay, great. Yes, sorry. Councillor Godbout, I just wanted to follow up. There is no amount set aside that's required for assessing the tree bylaw. We do that within this. It's absorbed into our operating budget. Okay. With regard to the fire service, I think I can do that. We replace the antique fire truck. We want to replace the motor in that truck at the cost of $25,000. With regard to engineering, Mr. Cormier talked about this, is this scanning of municipal streets. The last time we did it was in 2022. We do it every 3 years. So it comes back on a regular basis every 3 years in the amount of $30,000. A traffic study, Mr. Cormier also referred to that for Champlain Street in the amount of $100,000. Facilities improvement, we're talking about Jeux d'Acadie, which are happening next year. We're talking here about the track behind Malenfant School. If we want to be able to have competitions in the amount of 180,000, we're looking at getting some grants, and that's why I have potential financing of 72,000 included. That's included in my revenues. It's been budgeted. And I continue in recreation, a donor wall at the Uniplex in the amount of $50,000. With regard to urban mobility, infrastructure for new trip stops, $10,000 for Heritage Circuit, and a book for the 75th anniversary of the municipalities, 50,000 for that. With regard to planning, and if you need more details, I think someone's here behind me, so he will be able to answer. So it's a preliminary study for the municipal planning plan, 60,000. For IT, there's a general amount of 125,000. There was also an amount of 25,000 for water and sewage. So there is an amount for projects next year. Good evening. The 125,000 from the general fund is to complete work in 2025 that were supposed to be completed in 2024. So in October of next year, Microsoft will no longer support Windows 10 or Office 2016, 2019, Exchange, and more. So October is the deadline where these products will no longer be supported. In order to be able to be insurable, we need to have updated and supported systems in place. So in 2024, we thought we were going to do about half of this work according to our work plan, but out of the three senior staff members in this service who would normally do these updates, unfortunately, these posts have been vacant for about 2/3 of the year. So it wasn't possible to get that work done. So we had a transfer of parts of these salaries to send this work out to be done because we have twice the workload for next year. So that's the explanation for this amount. Council members' questions? There being none, thank you. Thanks, Sean. Let's move on to tourism. 60,000 for events and tourism action plan. We are hoping to get $54,000 for those activities. And finally, Public Works, consultation for a needs analysis for the operations center. We're looking at the future. So what kind of operation center do we want with the increasing population and the services required? So we also provide for additional financing of 75,000. And I have Mr. Brook here if you have any questions about this. So this concludes my list with regard to one-time requests for funding in the amount of $1.2 million. Members' questions? No? Okay, thank you. For the one-time projects that were carried over in 2024, from 2024, there's a 655,000 amount. Feasibility study for the Dieppe market. Last year we had 180,000, about 30,000 was used. So it leaves $150,000 for a market study or feasibility study. With regard to Francophonie initiatives, we had this in the budget last year. The work wasn't done. We expect to do that this year. Same thing with regard to signage in the city center, $100,000 there. Dieppe immigration strategy, that didn't happen last year. And also collaboration immigration plan for Dieppe Mountain Review of 27,000. With regard to heritage, the naming project, toponymy project wasn't done. So that'll happen in 2025. And with regard to planning and urban growth strategy and secondary plan, we had an amount in 2024. So some 80,000 was used in 2024, and the balance will be spent in 2025 in the amount of $240,000. That concludes the list of 655,000. No questions? Questions? Let's continue on. Now we're at new expenditures and so N2 requests. And for this, I'll ask Ms. Berriot to explain human resource requests. And there's a component for water and sewage for some of these positions as well. Thank you and good evening. Good evening and welcome. Good evening, Your Worship and all councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to give you our recommendations for new human resource positions in 2025. And by the way, it wasn't our Barrio family who had the horse racing. No, not with that accent for sure. No, the accent from Baie Sainte Marie. Okay, so before I give you the two slides I simply want to add that the analysis that was done in order to make these recommendations took various things into account for the budget. and the strategic plan and the action plan for 2025. And we paid special attention to positions that would have an impact on the organization, including impacts on efficiency and organizational capability for doing these projects. So these recommended positions will have an effect, like all the positions that I'll be telling you about this evening, have a snowball effect on many other things. So, as I mentioned, I have 2 slides to share with you to talk to you about the new positions we're recommending. So the 2 first positions is the legal services position and the financial analyst position. As you can see in brackets, these are new positions that we came to council for previously, but these are new expenditures for 2025. So you have seen me previously in there for these 2 positions. There's another one to create a new legal service in the city, and the financial analyst position is also a new position for the financial services unit. So there's a pay finance officer to add to this service, and then 2 human resource counselors. It's very specific for the human resources unit. We are proposing a labor relations counselor and a second position for disability cases. So these are the reasons for these 2 positions. The next 2, as you can see here, are 2 environmental positions. One is a project lead in environment and a urban forest technologist. And for continuity, we have 1 position converted that we're recommending. The position of community officer was a temporary position that we would like to convert into a permanent position at the city. Then 2 next positions are team-related for planning and development. One is administrative support, and we're adding a new planner for that service. For community development, we're converting not only 1 position, but we're adding a team lead for those who are in the service to welcome and provide information. And also we have 2 positions for operational water and sewage unit. This concludes my presentation, and these are the positions we recommend for human resources 2025. Any questions? Councillor Godbout, thank you. Could you tell me about the current situation with regard to those who do follow up on complaints with compliance with bylaws? How many positions, bylaw compliance officers, the bylaw officers? So the number of permanent positions that are already in the budget and the number of positions that are filled, and how many of these individuals deal with complaints and how many are not dealt with, and can we meet the need with regard to recruitment and position? Maybe Marc Melanson has other information that you're looking for. With regard to positions, we have a manager for the group who manages 4 positions, these bylaw enforcement officers. 3 of the 4 positions are filled, so there's a vacant position currently. It's an active competition currently underway. With regard to complaint management, we're patrolling, and so we also react to the complaints we receive. This is where the approach is undertaken with Tammy Polsner, and it's difficult with even with a full team of 4 to be fully present throughout the week. And we're talking about 7 days a week and also in the evening. But the objective is to have 4 people. I know the competition is open to fill the 4th position. We're going to try and do this to complete the team to be much more present in the city. Is 4 enough? When did we assess this? Because we increased our boundaries. We have a amazing increase in our population. When did we assess that 4 would meet the need, and what changements were done? Well, to tell you, this was one sector that initially a former assistant clerk had asked for 2 additional positions for 2025. As you can see, we haven't assessed the work of 4 bylaw compliance officers because we didn't have a full team. So we're hoping that in 2025, we can look at these 4 positions operationally, and we'll see if 2026 will lead us to add another 2 team members. So this is the approach we have for this, and better to see what the reality of the sector is. I saw a peace officer instead of a pay officer. I wanted to see what the relationship was between the two, but there isn't one. But they're going to be paid. Is this a transition? It was in this year that we had the 2 additional for bylaw compliance officers. We had up until last year, there were 2 and we added 2. So we have a position to come to fill. And so we're looking at the 4. Well, we discussed this, and often in feeling safe, we talk about increasing RCMP costs and what can we do to contribute to the people feeling safe and the presence of people in if you're a member of the RCMP, you could be doing other things. This is something to explore in the months to come when we'll be able to replace Stefan and other positions. We're encouraged to do that because this is going to be part of the solutions that we're going to have to look at over time and keep this feeling of safety, to look at means that are less costly, and work with the Kodiak RCMP as well, sure, in cooperation with them. Mr. Councillor Godet, yes. I asked this a couple of years ago, and I'll ask the question again. I noticed that we never have openings for electricians or plumbers. I'm not looking for another job, mind you, but with the size of the city we have and all the buildings, I wonder what such a person would cost us per year. If there were lights to be changed, I know that they couldn't do all, but if we managed all the projects, but I just want to know what we're spending per year on those services, maybe an idea to have a look at that, and given the size of the city. Maybe this is the answer that I gave 2 years ago. We'll ensure that we follow it up and we'll look at the costs, and maybe over 2 years there's been an increase. And so if we're looking at the building sector, we can look at what the costs are, much like we did with other positions. What services do we get from the private sector? And at the present time, maybe we can't have an internal position, or we should have an internal position for a better return. Someone can't do everything, but they might be able to manage the projects. I'm not comparing us to other cities, but our neighboring cities have 4 or 5, and it comes with an assessment, and we'll keep you up to date on that. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much, and good evening.
Donc, maintenant, la deuxième partie des nouvelles.
Great. Now the second part of the new expenses or new spending for 2025. So we're talking about almost $1 million for the RCMP. So that's as a new expenditure. They've asked for 17 new officers, 5 municipal employees, plus a new building as well. So we are only being asked to be paid, pay a portion of that So the 17 officers, the cost of that is $2.4 million. But if we had to pay that all in one shot, it would be over $4 million. So this is our portion of we pay 18% of the total cost of the 17 new officers. Same thing for the new building. The costs are evaluated at $4 million, but the final amount is higher. So that's a big portion of our new expenditures for next year. The next two, I'm going to let Mr. Gauvin tell you about. Oh, sorry, Jérémy. Sorry, Mr. Richard is going to do that because he's not here. That's right. All right. Yes, unfortunately, Mr. Aubé is at a national conference. And since our budget dates changed, he wasn't able to make it tonight there. So, okay, so for public transit, we came to you in March and we presented the growth plan. So you have to plan those things in advance. If you want to go get new equipment, new buses, we know that it takes 12 to 24 months to get information. So I just want to bring you back to that moment in time. We had identified in March 2023 that there was a need. We had talked about our vision and what we needed. And at that time, you had kind of given us the green light for purchasing buses. So we order them in 2024, and if everything goes well, we'll be getting them in the spring 2025. So we've got new buses. We want them to be on the road. So the amount that you see here is to implement those new buses that we've purchased. And this is in response to a need that we've responded. Our population is growing, immigration, our demographics are changing. We have growing needs, and for the last 3 years, transit use has decreased. And why? Because of the increase in traffic, bus service is slower. So what we tried to do 18 months ago and what we're trying to do now is to try to foresee where we're going. And so, yes, these are big amounts, but it's because we have significant catching up to do to bring transit to where we want it to be. We're not going to be there yet in 2025, but this is a first step towards where we want to go. So it's a big amount, but it's linked to the purchase of buses. And maybe another aside, there were commitments made in terms of Lakeburn. The airport is also asking for service. Dieppe Boulevard is going to be completed. So these are all reasons, and maybe I'm repeating myself here, but these, we talked about greenhouse gas, and this is part of our greenhouse gas strategy. So basically what we're looking at with this figure is 2 or 3 new routes and probably doubling the number of buses on the road. We currently have 3 buses that are in operation 7 days a week. And our objective by purchasing new buses is to add 2 or 3 new buses. So then there'll be 6 buses on the road at all times. That doesn't necessarily mean that service, the number of routes will double, but we'd like to offer a bit more frequent service. So I just wanted to give you that context. So, I mean, because you could look at the number and say, wow, it's a big amount, but it's part of a strategy that we, set 18 months ago, and that will continue in the coming. So it is a big amount, though. All right, so that's with regard to, I don't know if you have any questions on or concerns about public transit, but I just wanted to give you that information so that you can understand where we are. Thank you for the information. If we compare ourselves to the rest of Canada in terms of ratios and capital versus the population, where are we in terms of spending? Are there ratios, first of all? Can we, so that we can compare ourselves with other communities when it comes to transit and investments in that regard? Maybe through the FCM? Well, that's where Jérémy is. He's at a national summit, and so there are some standards and some figures. Yes, there's also the regional master plan that established certain standards and a certain vision for our region. And one of the things is that we said that rush hour trips should be at a frequency of 15 minutes, and then outside of rush hour it would be 30, and that's developed out of industry standards, and that's what we're trying to do here too. We're trying to improve our service levels and our frequency. So we can follow the standards, but we want to stand out. I think that's, if we really want to make a difference, if we want to offer a viable choice to the residents of Dieppe, we should do that, and I think that's where we're headed. You know, if we offer second-class service, we can do that too, because our service doesn't really allow people to make a choice yet, and that's, I think, what we were talking about wanting to change. So with this amount, we would improve the service to the airport, and we want to go get people that weren't using the service because the service wasn't available in those areas. So, and just the increase in traffic in Dieppe, you know, we've gone up about 45%. I received a text last week, and we hit $70,000 in revenue for the first time, or 70%. So sorry, I'm kind of getting away from the topic here, but I think we're doing the right thing here. And there is research shown that for every dollar invested, we have a return of $3 to $4. So I think we're on the right track, and we're trying to be proactive. I'm trying to tell you where we're at, and that's why we're presenting. That's why we're coming forward with this big amount. I have another question there. Well, thank you very much for the information. Okay, with regard to Councillor Godbout's comment, since we're increasing the number of buses, will there be a study in the coming years on, you know, maybe Dieppe should associate with our neighboring communities, or sorry, we depend on the other cities, but maybe we should have our own independent service now. Is it worth looking at that to see if maybe there would be some projects? Well, we've already thought about that, and as part of our analysis of the operations center, and we've been very transparent with OC Transfer, could we have a transit hub here in Dieppe? Would there be benefits for us to do that? So because our buses have lose money and efficiency, but if we were just operating in the city of Dieppe, if we could kind of manage our own network, that's something to look at. But so, yes, we are thinking about it. Yeah. I would also say that Kodiak might benefit from having an operational center here in Dieppe for buses that run on Chediac Road, and rather than going through Millennium. So it might be a win-win situation for everyone. And, you know, there are other companies that offer bus service, and they have a certain expertise, and we should include them in the discussion as well. All right, is that it? Is that it for now? Let's continue. All right, the next, and maybe Luc can talk about this, but the consultation of urban mobility, $40,000. I'll let him talk about that. That's for studies related to engineering. So the extension of the near of a trail near Canadian Tire. It's just to look at different options and see what we need. I think there are 3 of those in 2025 we're looking at doing. Any questions? All right, carry on. All right, 4th amount, $75,000 for the consultation on Francophonie initiative. I had told you about $100,000 project, a one-off, but for this amount, we want to call upon a consultant to help us develop this initiative. There is $60,000 as well for the consultation on the master leisure plan and $50,000 to start a sidewalk rehabilitation program. So if there are repairs that would need to be done, it would be done through that program, or they would be done through that program. Any questions? Let's carry on. So we continue to put money into asset management. So $500,000 for transaction capital and $600,000 in the asset replacement program. And there's a decrease as well of $200,000 in debt servicing. So basically what we're doing is to continue investing a certain amount of the operating budget for assets. 25% rather. Any questions? Current expenses now. These are expenses that continue from 2024. So $1.4 million for the RCMP. Early, I mentioned new project, but here we're talking about the second portion of the, so we're talking about salaries here, operations, maintenance, and the surplus as well. So the RCMP operates a bit like a municipality. So as soon as there's a municipality or a surplus, it's brought forward for 2 years. In 2024, the RCMP had a surplus of about $2 million, and 2023, they had a deficit of $2 million. And so when we were in so the $1.4 million, $700,000 is linked to the fact that the RCMP had a surplus 1 year and a deficit the following year. In terms of existing salaries, $900,000. Maintenance and repairs, $240,000. Electricity and heating, same thing, $200,000. Electricity rate is getting more expensive. There is a concert agreement like the YQM. So there's a new agreement that is being negotiated for 2025 to 2029. So costs are going up for the city. $125,000 are for property assessment costs. So this is the money that the province asks to be able to study, properties in Dieppe. And then other expenses, we're talking about insurance, gas, software. This amount includes a number of different expenses. If the PAC meeting needs interpretation services, so it'll cost a little bit more. The use of credit cards. So we didn't want to break down each individual amount, so we've just put them together in this this amount. So it's each department has about $40,000 of expenses. In terms of legal costs, Earlier, we talked about a new position, a legal position. Well, this position will pay for itself through lowered costs. So this year, we've reduced it by $110,000 to finance the legal position. And then there are financial incentives that have gone down $140,000.
L'édifice 250 Acadie.
So Promenade 9 building, that expenditure will be paid for soon. But 250 Acadie will then come online, 309 Champlain. Any questions on that slide? No questions? Let's continue. So here, we've gone through salaries. Salaries have gone up $1.9 million. External commissions, Kodiak Transpo, RCMP. So there was a $3.2 million increase. The cost of water has gone down by $200,000, and that's due to the fact that we've completely absorbed a loss that we incurred previously. Operating capital and asset management program went up by $1.1 million. Debt servicing went down $200,000. Transfer to reserves went down $1.7 million, and other operating expenses have gone up by $2.1 million. So that is the budget for 2025. Okay. And finally, this wonderful evening of budget requests, this very exciting evening of budget requests. This is an overview of the next 5 years when it comes to the general operating fund. So in 2025, there was a 12.8% increase. So we still have two 10% segments to go and get. So I think 2026 and 2027 will still see some nice increases, and then it'll decrease after that, but we never know. You never know what's going to happen. So, so that results in a decrease in property taxes. So 6.5 cents, 6.5 cents, and 6 cents, etc. Capital budget should, with the completion of the Dieppe extension or Dieppe Boulevard extension, that amount will go down in the future. Our borrowing costs will be higher and then lower as of 2028, and then our debt to equity ratio, there are the figures. And then for 2026, maybe I'll end with that. We think that you might think that if we're increasing our property taxes by 12%, that we can, that's going to result in a lot of money, but that in 2025, I haven't made. So the new money that will be coming in 2026, based on that 12% increase, is about $5.4 million. So that's basically what we'll be getting in 2026. Of that, $2.5 million will go to OC Transpo and RCMP right off the bat. So that leaves about $2.8 million left for the rest. Of that amount, $1 million will be for salary increases. 800,000 will be for operating capital. So now I'm at $1.8 million. And then debt servicing costs will, the debt servicing is about $700,000 that needs to be paid. And, you know, I haven't talked about normal expenses that will be increasing. So 2026 is not looking that great, even if we, you know, if we're, even if we have a 12% increase because of the RCMP and OC Transpo. But there are other items that we aren't aware of. Will we be getting more money through municipal reform? I don't think so. Maybe. We'll have to see. But from what we know today, is that it won't be easy to balance our budget in 2025 and 2026, even with the increases, because there are two big items that will be taking a lot of money from the other items. So 2025, 2026, I don't anticipate a lot of new expenditures or hiring to balance the budget, but we'll have the conversation again next year. So, and that's all I had. Well, we might not believe in Santa Claus, but maybe Mrs. Santa Claus will be generous. Are there any questions from our councillors or our vast public? If there are no questions, I think our intention is to come to the council meeting next Monday. To present the final budget. So our intention is to bring you the budget next week. All right. Thank you for your patience. We know that this is never an easy exercise. It's a long meeting. We lost 2 players during the game. I think these are lower body injuries that have been sustained, but all right. Have a nice evening and we'll see you next time.